The continued wet weather may prove to be problematic for farmers wanting to harvest their crop. Iowa State University Extension grain quality specialist Charlie Herberg believes the wet conditions add a new issue to the harvest.
It's just been a difficult fall, and now we're going to have mold problems in the field for sure. And farmers need to scout their fields, look to see which hybrids or which fields seem to be more and less affected by mold problems and harvest them first.
Herberg says the condition of this year's grain is slightly below last year's harvest. He says for long-term storage of grain, corn moisture needs to be around 15% moisture, and for soybeans, the moisture content should be around 10 to 12%. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker urged fellow Democrats in Iowa this weekend to stay faithful despite hurt and angry feelings in the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court fight.
It is not a time to give up. It's a time to get up, to rise up, to speak up. It's time for you not to wait for hope, but to be the hope.
Booker was the keynote speaker at the Iowa Democratic Party's Fall Gala fundraiser Saturday night. He flew to Des Moines immediately after casting his no vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Booker is scheduled to campaign with Iowa Democrats in Adel, Boone, North Liberty, and Davenport. A registered sex offender in Iowa faces new charges after investigators say he molested several young boys on camping trips to a Story County park. KCCI reports that 30-year-old Michael Ferguson took several boys between the ages of 9 and 4 camping at Hickory Grove Park in Colo. Court documents say Ferguson forced at least 4 children to perform sexual acts. Ferguson was recently arrested in Stark County, Ohio, and extradited to Story County. He's charged with 2 counts of second-degree sexual abuse, assault with intent to commit sexual abuse, and indecent exposure. He's being held in lieu of $500,000 bail. Ferguson was convicted of assault with the intent to commit sexual abuse of a teenage boy in 2008. This has been Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. Have a great day.
Here's the AM 1400 KVFD weatherology forecast. Scattered thunderstorms likely this afternoon, otherwise overcast. High temperatures reach up to 68, south winds 5 to 10 miles per hour. Scattered thunderstorms likely tonight, lows level off around 58, cloudy skies. Scattered thunderstorms again tomorrow, high temperatures reach up to 66. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. Currently, it's 59.
The opinions and remarks expressed on this radio program by the host, guests, and call-in listeners are the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not reflect the views of management or ownership of KVFD AM 1400.
Mother Nature always has a way of delivering a few surprises. That's why your Nutrien Ag Solutions retailer is always standing by. Formerly serving you as Crop Production Services, we're the same faces you've relied on for years. We're more than an unwavering partner. We're the first choice in the field to help you get the most out of yours.
Visit nutrienagsolutions.com to learn how.
In our house, bedtime is complicated. My wife is always freezing, and when she layers up the bed, I get way too hot. Hi, I'm Scott Tannen, founder of Boll & Branch, makers of the world's most comfortable sheets, loved by 3 U.S. presidents. If you're like us, you'll love our flannel bedding. Back for a limited time at bollandbranch.com. They're unbelievably soft, warm, and breathable. So Missy stays warm and I don't overheat. It's like magic. We let you sleep in them for 30 nights. If you're not impressed, send them back for a full refund. Our flannel sheets come in 14 stunning patterns and colors. You're guaranteed to find a style you love. But don't wait. Last year, they sold out in just a few weeks. Go to bollandbranch.com today for $50 off your first set of sheets, plus free shipping with promo code RELIEF. That's $50 off plus free shipping right now at bollandbranch.com. Promo code RELIEF. bollandbranch.com spelled B-O-L-L and branch.com.
Michael Devine, when you want compelling talk.
Who cares what people say about you? We love you.
Michael Devine at AM 1400 KVFD.
Do you ever get tired of watching bad things happen to people?
Sticking up for you when no one else will.
Oh, good.
Yeah, somebody's got to stick up for you. Ain't gonna happen with the Democrats or the Republicans, so here we go. Desperate, we turn to Jesus, or the Reverend Pastor Austin Hill. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back.
You've been gone. You've had quite an adventure.
Yeah, I've been down under. I was in 2 weeks in Australia and New Zealand.
Australia and New Zealand.
And I'll tell you, even there, people were talking about Brett Kavanaugh.
No kidding. That's the other side of the world, that's for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things, you'd hope that when you go to the other side of the world, you might escape some of the day-to-day stressors or realities that you experience. But it seems as though the divisions of our country and the rancor with which we were talking to one another was a topic of conversation and interest, even for people in the southern island of New Zealand. Very rural place, and news made it all the way there.
I bet. I bet. What did they have to say about it, just out of curiosity?
Well, first of all, they were fascinated that we can't seem to agree about anything. They were fascinated that we could get in such an uproar, and they didn't really seem to understand why we get so dramatic about any of these events. Really, that was the comments from one gentleman.
What did he say?
But he just was amazed at the level of drama that we as Americans have.
That is so media driven. Every one of those senators on the Judiciary Committee were well aware of the cameras, and that there would be video clips on all the news stations and cable stations throughout the day and night and week.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, Cory Booker, I am Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. God almighty.
Well, it was amazing. I've just been reflecting on the day, I believe, like the next day of the news cycle after Justice Kennedy had retired. I mean, the first time people were talking about this vacant seat, it was already couched in terms of this is going to slant the Supreme Court, and it's going to skew it past into a majority on the right. And I mean, it was politicized the moment that seat was vacant.
Yes, it was. Lindsey Graham, in his rant, mentioned that 23 minutes after Brett Kavanaugh had been nominated for the high court by President Trump, Senator Charles Schumer, the minority leader, announced his opposition and that he would never vote for Kavanaugh.
23 minutes.
23 minutes. Not 23 hours.
Wow.
23 minutes. This isn't democracy. This is a deep politicalization and desire for power. You can hang it all on the Republicans if you want. I suppose we're all going to see it through our own eyes, and the Republicans are going to say this is a power grab by the Democrats, and it was. The Democrats are going to say it's a power grab by the Republicans, and it was.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I don't think any side could have come out of this feeling good. No matter the outcome, everyone is just going to kind of feel miserable.
Well, I think the Republicans are feeling all right. I mean, Trump is talking a lot about it, and they're apparently popping beers somewhere in the Senate chambers. I don't know, but the country didn't win.
Yeah, not at all.
We didn't. I mean, you and I, and the rest of the people in Webster County, the state of Iowa, and in the country, we didn't win.
Certainly.
Maybe this is my best hope, that Judge Kavanaugh turns out to be a decent judge. That's my hope.
It's kind of all the only thing we can hope for at this point, right?
We can hope for is right, and I think I don't hold his rant against him, where he lashed out at the Democrats and accused them from being partisan, of being partisan. He was humiliated repeatedly by the Democrats in front of his wife and two little girls, and by many, many women who came to support him or were sitting behind him. The thing the television cameras didn't point out very often was the reaction of the women who came to support Judge Kavanaugh. And they were professional women themselves for the most part. But I caught a couple of side shots of Judge Kavanaugh, so we could see these, and a lot of these women were crying.
Wow. While
these accusations were being made. And Cory Booker, I think, has disgraced himself when Cory Booker was ranting and carrying on like a damn fool. It was just a disgrace. It was, I'm running for president, I'm doing this, and it was just a disgrace.
Well, I heard something that was very intriguing to me. Just within the last 24 hours or so, I saw this on Facebook. Someone here in town was posting some ideas about things that could make Washington better. And I was very intrigued by one of these suggestions, which was simply that that any bill or any motion that comes forward in the Senate or the House would be done so anonymously, so that you wouldn't have the name or the political affiliation of the person bringing that bill forward. And you would actually vote on it and discuss it based on its merit, as opposed to, people's individual grandstanding and their own posturing. And that sounds very appealing to me. I mean, I don't pretend to understand how our political system would work and how, if that could be possible or not, but that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
To actually talk about the merit of ideas.
Well, and again, I come to you and ask, what is the Christian response to this? Do we have one? I mean, Norman Vincent Van Peel, Bishop Fulton Sheen, those men in their time were important figures in the country. Yeah. They had the power to step forward and remind us that we are failing as Christians when we do these things. I suppose the McCarthy hearings would have been a comparison back in the mid-1950s, but McCarthy flamed out. Yeah. This just keeps going on and on and on.
Well, I think what I continue to hammer on is that the more we can actively try to not be partisan, the more we can challenge the party line, even if just for the sake of challenging the party line, I think is helpful, because we as Christians believe that first and foremost, our allegiance is to Jesus before any political party. And so I do commend those who voted against their party on either side, just if for no other reason than they were challenging the way that our political system seems to be working right now. And I would encourage any of us to vote not just along party lines. And the temptation, when you go to the ballot box, is to just vote all one ticket or not. Often people say, oh, well, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, so I'm just going to vote for all the Republicans or all the Democrats. I just recently got a little mailer in the mail, and it has each side of the political and some of these different positions. And, here's this candidate and here's that candidate. And it has a list of, 8 issues. And this person is yes on this. The other one is no on that. And you go down the list, and what's so infuriating to me is on all of those 8, they're exactly polar opposites. and it's like, well, what if maybe on 3 of these issues I agree with one candidate, but 4 of the issues I agree with the other candidate? And what am I left to do? And why does it have to be, if I'm in favor of having sanctuary cities but not having full and open abortion rights, why is it that I have to pick one person who, why does all of that have to be a package deal?
Well, apparently here in Iowa, and this is something our 2 political parties here apparently agree on, we can have sanctuary cities, but we can't have E-Verify. This is an unusual position for a Democrat to take, as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't surprise me the Republicans are trying to get away with that nonsense, but they won't get away with it on this radio station. I'll tell you that. That is a load. That is a load. I mean, I appreciate the sanctuary cities things, but
I guess my point is, I think as Christians, we should always be cautious or leery if our quote unquote Christian views happen to 100% align with any political party or even with any one political candidate.
No, I do not believe the Republican and Democratic Party or Libertarian Party are particularly Christian. I really don't.
Yeah.
Christianity is separate from politics, to my mind.
But what I see, though, is that time and time again, I mean, all you have to do is scroll the Facebook feed, and I have liberal friends who are saying, this is unjust, and, because of our Christian duty, we need to, oppose Kavanaugh and, all these kinds of things. And at the same time, you have other people in the same Facebook feed that are saying that they've been praying and they believe God has chosen Kavanaugh for such a time as this. And, we need to support God's chosen candidate in Kavanaugh. And so which person really has God on their side?
Well, I remember the great line by Joe Louis, the great boxer in the 1930s and 40s, heavyweight champion of the world. He was not a man who was schooled, but he was a wise man. And a reporter asked him once if he prayed before the fight to win the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And Louis replied, "No, I don't. See, if I pray and ask to win the fight and the other fellow prays and asks to win the fight, what's God going to do?"
Exactly.
What's God going to do?
He's in a conundrum, right?
So I don't think God gets involved in those decisions. I really don't. I mean, God not like Satan, but God will let us know the truth. Here it is. You may accept it or you may not.
Mm-hmm.
That is the gift of free will that I gave you, the gift and curse
that
I gave you.
Yeah.
And I expect you to follow me.
Yeah. Now, I think the rub and kind of the lowest hanging fruit is, well, look at the political party of the Nazis.
Yeah.
And, they were a political party, and Hitler, was democratically elected. And, that's kind of the case in point, where at some point there is a moral obligation to oppose a violent regime or, group of people. And so then, of course, back that, okay, everyone's going to agree with it, Hitler, but so then where does that point lie for everyone else further down the line?
Mm-hmm. By the way, I would like to wish my son a happy 36th birthday today.
Well, happy birthday.
It just occurred to me that I better do that if I go this whole 3-hour show and not.
There you go.
I'm in big trouble, Pastor.
Yeah.
Pastor Austin Hill, the First Presbyterian Church, is our guest here at AM 1400 KVFD, the voice for Dodge. If you have a question for the pastor, you may call 515-955-1400, 515-955-1400. I wonder what Bishop Sheen would have said about all of this noise that happened here this last month, or Norman Vincent Peale, or any of the great, or C.S. Lewis, or any of the great religious leaders of our time.
Well, I do think in some ways, if you go back 50, 75, 100 years ago, there were more significant evils in the world, it seemed like, than our own political opponents across the aisle.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And I think some of this is coming from a position of comfort or privilege that we have as a nation, that we're not as busy or we're not as concerned about fighting huge military powers elsewhere. And so we have the ability to focus our efforts and our energy, our negativity upon ourselves and upon one another. Now, some would argue that there are some of those greater political threats, Russia being one of them, and everything that's been happening with our current administration, making those connections. But even that is still just a shadow of what that was 2 generations ago.
I mentioned to you before we went on the air that David Grinberg of St. Olaf Lutheran Church across the way here used to sit in that chair. And he never, and I hesitate to speak for him, because maybe I misinterpreted what he said, but he almost never was in favor of Christians certainly being in war or advocating for war. But he was almost always opposed to conflict. He did not believe it was a Christian way. The Christian way was love, to offer love, to teach love, to show love, always, always, always.
Mm-hmm.
I, of course, had trouble with that, because I believe if you turn the other cheek, you get slapped on that one too. And I believe history has proven me right. But I appreciate what he said as Christ-like. I understand that as Christ teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not the time of ancient Rome where Daniel could enter the lion's den and the lions would all lay down. We have to remember that plenty of Christians got eaten.
Yes, many of them were killed for their faith.
Absolutely.
And now I think part of the irony is that's also the time when the Christian faith grew the most strongly in history, is when they were being persecuted. So as much as I don't like that idea, I do think there's something to be said about when the church is being persecuted or is being really forced to distill what it believes and stand behind it, even give one's life because of those beliefs, I think that's something more compelling than, well, I guess maybe I'll go to church if I feel like it and nothing better is happening on Sunday morning. So at least in that sense, while none of us want to be persecuted for our faith, I do think it was much more clear that those who followed Christ in that time really had to decide to take it seriously, because you could lose your life for it. Whereas now there's very little personal cost, if any, in following Jesus. Now, as our society increasingly secularizes, I think that personal cost maybe will increase, and we will be forced to make some choices if we really want to follow Christ. But to go back to your question about conflict, I think even in loving relationships, there's always some level of conflict. If you have two friends, or if you have a husband and a wife, people in a marriage, there's conflict to work through. That doesn't mean you don't love each other. I mean, you have to work through that conflict, because no two people are the same. They don't have the same priorities at all times. They don't have the same abilities or the same resources. So I do think conflict to some degree is unavoidable. However, I think resorting to violence should be avoided at all costs. If I were to, if I were to go to the question of, is there ever a time of just war? I would think the only time I could really unequivocally get behind some kind of physical violence or a war would be if it was done in an effort to defend someone who's not able to defend themselves. So if you have to stand up for those who are being violated in some other way, I think that's a time when it is appropriate to use physical force or violence to stop that aggression.
Pastor David Grimberg and I often talked about the Second World War and the Nazi Party.
Yeah.
Of course, Germany was a heavily Christian country.
Yeah.
And it was heavily Lutheran country. And many, many Lutheran ministers stepped forward to support Hitler.
Yeah.
And the Nazis were brutal mass murderers, just not just of Jews, of Poles, they were
millions,
brutal killers. And they apparently were doing so in some cases in the name of God. That always intrigued me. I cannot possibly understand what was going through a man's mind who was born in the early part of the 20th century and fought for Germany, fought for the Nazis in the Second World War.
And that they would be, in any other sense, this is probably the most confounding, a well-adjusted, reasonable, nice young man.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't even realize, you wouldn't even know it, but they'd, go to work that day and slaughter some more people and then come back, and people in those communities didn't even know what was going on.
It's
unfathomable.
It is. I really think those German soldiers, some of them deeply religious, Lutheran, and certainly Catholic.
Yeah.
Those were the two primary religions. Methodism was also a minor religion in Germany. But I really think they were doing the will of God. They thought they were doing the will of God. And how in the world do you make that jump?
Well, and I think to some degree, it starts with demonizing people you disagree with, demonizing people who are different from you.
That's what happened with the Nazis, that they were on a long campaign to portray the Jews, certainly, as inhuman.
I mean, if you can somehow believe that the world is a better place without these people, then you believe you are doing what's just. And now, still, I don't know how you get an entire people group that way. But I think if you have enough suffering, and if you have a consistent effort by one or a group of people to create a narrative, that this suffering or these economic hardships are because of another people group or are because of these people who are different from us, I think you can maybe over the course of a generation or two kind of build up that hatred, which I think for me is what's so concerning about our current condition within our own country, because it seems as though those divisions grow, and the understanding or the lack of understanding from one group to another seems in many ways to grow.
It does. But I do know we're getting into a very weird area where where both sides of the political spectrum are being demonized as somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of years ago, that lunatic, a 66-year-old man of all people, Bernie Sanders supporter, gets in his car in Illinois, drives to Washington, D.C., and shoots a couple of congressmen. I mean, what is that? If not, I mean, all he saw was Republican. And it can go the other way.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible. And even just with, even take Kavanaugh, I mean, any one of these issues, but how easy is it to think, well, if you voted for Kavanaugh as a senator, then you must hate women. I mean, that is the logic. I mean, you know, if you hear the words of those protesters, and I don't want to diminish the suffering that I'm sure many people who were, you know, right there in the front lines have experienced in their own lives, but that kind of moral equivalence, you know, where a vote for Kavanaugh is a vote against women, you know, whereas then on the same token, a vote against Kavanaugh is a vote against order and due process. And how can we escape that kind of
propaganda?
Yeah, and just moralistic thinking in some of those ways. And it's like, okay, let's just pause and try to see the humanity of these people who are across the aisle.
Well, here's a internet meme, and of course, internet memes can be wrong, but supposedly this young woman is a school teacher in Minnesota, and she has tweeted, "So who's going to take one for the team and kill Kavanaugh?"
Oh, man.
That's not really even that funny, is it? I mean, internet memes are kind of, they're supposed to be jokes. They're supposed to be a hint of truth to them.
Yeah.
But this is, I hope there's not a hint of truth to this. Pastor Austin Hill is our guest.
Divine Intervention at AM 1400 KVFD, where Fort Dodge talk.
You don't have bad luck. The reason that bad things happen to you is because you're a dumbass.
Michael Divine, broadcasting live.
Okay, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, 2:33. The news is next. We be trucking. Oh, yes. You can stop the rain anytime now, Lord, anytime.
Trucking, got my chips cashed in, keep trucking, like the Doodah Man together, more or less in line, just keep trucking, on. Active Health Chiropractic, leading our community to health.
Discover true wellness at Active Health Chiropractic. Hi, I'm Dr. Zach Mason. When you choose Active Health Chiropractic, you choose healing without drugs, life with mobility, and improved health with chiropractic. You'll love our new state-of-the-art facility, and you'll be amazed at how much better you feel. Call our office today and ask about the gift of health. Don't wait. Active Health Chiropractic, Fort Dodge.
And feel better today.
Current price times 1,000 acres. Carry the one. These days, it's hard to make the math work for your soybean fields. The BASF Liberty Link system with Liberty herbicide makes it easier. Start with a 2+ bushel per acre yield advantage. Add in lower system input costs and more complete weed control, and you get an extra $33 or more profit potential per acre compared to Asgrow Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans. Grow smart with Liberty Link and BASF. Always read and follow label directions.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Benzgal with the KVFD Afternoon News. One person was killed, several hurt in a house fire Sunday in the central Iowa town of Huxley. Radio Iowa's Matt Kelly reports.
3 residents of the house suffered from smoke inhalation and 1 died from it. That was 47-year-old Brett Van Ersvelde. He and 44-year-old Julie McLean were trying to get their 17-year-old son from his bedroom when the first responders arrived. McLean is hospitalized, as is the teen. 2 girls managed to escape with no injuries, though a Huxley police officer and a Story County Sheriff's deputy were hurt. It's believed the fire started in the kitchen. The state fire marshal is investigating. Radio Iowa, I'm Matt Kelly.
A new facility called an intermodal hub has been proposed for downtown Fort Dodge that would link the Warden Plaza and Cultural Recreation Center that has also been proposed for the city. The intermodal hub would offer parking and a connection between various forms of transportation. The estimated cost of the project is $11.5 million, and city government is asking for a $7.63 million grant to help pay for it. December 18th is the date that the city will find out if they've received the grant. If awarded, construction could begin in 2020 and be finished in the spring of 2021. The facility would be at First Avenue South in Fort Dodge. The continued wet weather may prove to be problematic for farmers wanting to harvest their crop. Iowa State University Extension grain quality specialist Charlie Herberg believes the wet conditions add a new issue to the harvest.
It's just been a difficult fall, and now we're going to have mold problems in the field for sure. And farmers need to scout their fields, look to see which hybrids or which fields seem to be more and less affected by mold problems and harvest them first.
Herberg says the condition of this year's grain is slightly below last year's harvest. He says for long-term storage of grain, corn moisture needs to be around 15% moisture, and for soybeans, the moisture content should be around 10 to 12%. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker urged fellow Democrats in Iowa this weekend to stay faithful despite hurt and angry feelings in the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court fight.
It is not a time to give up. It's a time to get up, to rise up, to speak up. It's time for you not to wait for hope, but to be the hope.
Booker was the keynote speaker at the Iowa Democratic Party's Fall Gala fundraiser Saturday night. He flew to Des Moines immediately after casting his no vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Booker is scheduled to campaign with Iowa Democrats in Adel, Boone, North Liberty, and Davenport. A registered sex offender in Iowa faces new charges after investigators say he molested several young boys on camping trips to a Story County park. KCCI reports that 30-year-old Michael Ferguson took several boys between ages of 9 and 4 camping at Hickory Grove Park in Colo. Court documents say Ferguson forced at least 4 children to perform sexual acts. Ferguson was recently arrested in Stark County, Ohio, and extradited to Story County. He's charged with 2 counts of second-degree sexual abuse, assault with intent to commit sexual abuse, and indecent exposure. He's being held in lieu of $500,000 bail. Ferguson was convicted of assault with the intent to commit sexual abuse of a teenage boy in 2008. This has been Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. Have a great day.
This is AM 1400, KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge, 237 in the weather. Some rain today and a thunderstorm. I bet that surprised you. Steady temperature around 63 degrees overnight. Some more rain, low 58. Rain tomorrow, high 66. Wednesday, mostly cloudy with a high of 50. Thursday, sunny with a high only of 47 degrees. That's not good. Just to be wet and then real cold with so much grain still out in the field. On Friday, we have a slight chance of rain, mostly cloudy with a high only of 46. Saturday, a chance of rain, sunny with a high of 52. Sunday, with a chance of rain on Sunday. Otherwise, it'll be sunny with a high of 50. Right now in Fort Dodge, yeah, we have another flood watch in effect. I can't remember a time when we've had so many flood watches in our area, but we are in one right now until 7 in the morning on Wednesday. It's 58 degrees at AM 1400, KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. Obituaries this hour brought to us by Gunderson Funeral Home and Cremation Services at 1615 North 15th Street, Fort Dodge. You may contact Gunderson Funeral Home and Cremation Services by calling 515-576-7128 or online at www.gundersonfuneralhome.com. Phil Joslin, my old friend, has died at the age of 80. Philip Edwin Joslin, and I'm sorry to report this, has died at the age of 80. Phil had a lot of friends in town. The Joslin name was well known and well respected. I'm sorry that Phil is gone at the age of 80. Services for Phil Joslin will be held at a later date. Edward Jacobson of Fort Dodge has died at the age of 87. Edward G. Jacobson, 87 years old, died Sunday at Crestview Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Webster City. Services are pending for Edward Jacobson. Obituaries this hour brought to us by Gunderson Funeral Home and Cremation Services at 1615 North 15th Street, Fort Dodge. You may contact Gunderson Funeral Home and Cremation Services by calling 515-576-7128 or online at www.gundersonfuneralhome.com. This is AM 1400, KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. It's 240, 58 degrees. With a look at the closing market report, here's Dwayne Murley.
Here's a look at how the markets closed today. December corn down 1 3/4 at 366.5. March down 1 1/2 at 378.5. May corn down 1 3/4 at 385.25, and July down 1 1/2 at 390 3/4. November soybeans up 3/4 cent at 869 3/4. January up a half a penny at 883. March up a half a cent at 894 3/4. May up a quarter penny at 906. 57 3/4. December wheat closed down 7 cents at 5.14. Soybean meal down 1.40 a ton at 3.14.20. October live cattle up 37 cents at 1.14.17. December up a dime at 1.18 1/4. October feeders down a dime at 157.67. November up 20 cents at 158.42. October lean hogs up a quarter at 68.45, and December closed unchanged at 57.55. I'm Dwayne Murley.
Ride the bus with the Dart and Midas trends.
Need to get somewhere in Hamilton, Pocahontas, Calhoun, or Humboldt County? Midas will take you there. Live in Manson and need a ride to the grocery store? Midas will take you there. Live in Webster City and need a ride to the theater? Midas will take you there. Live in Rockwell City and need to get to the clinic? Midas will take you there. Call 800 Bus Ride. Midas, helping you get where you want to go. Your connection to Jefferson Lines.
Our job here's getting you there. Ride the bus.
Take the worry out of winter with a winter weather advisor on KVFD, brought to you by Community Health Center Fort Dodge, offering dental, behavioral health, and general medical assistance for men, women, and children. They're committed to your well-being. Community Health Center. Get to know them. And Creative Cakes, making life sweet with espresso, lunch, gourmet cupcakes, and other sweet treats. Creative Cakes in the Crossroads Mall, Fort Dodge. They make life sweet. Listen for the winter weather advisor on the Voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400 KVFD.
First impressions are everything. What kind of first impression are people getting when they walk into your business? Are the carpets clean and the floors shiny? Or do they look like they haven't been cleaned in months or even years? Make a good first impression with the help of Flat Out Clean Janitorial Services. They'll come to your business and clean everything from the floor to the ceiling. They'll even travel within a 30-mile radius of Fort Dodge. For a free estimate, find them on Facebook or call 570-9672. Flat Out Clean Janitorial Services, Fort Dodge.
So you're a winner on KVFD. Congratulations. Here's a few things you need to know. Prizes and gifts awarded to listeners are provided for promotional consideration. Winners are limited to one per household. Winners must give their own legal name. Callers are sometimes taped for later broadcast. We reserve the right to refuse prizes if rules are broken. All prizes must be picked up within 10 days. We are not responsible for taxes or fees associated with prizes won. Winners may be required to show ID. Got it? Good. Thanks for listening to the station that made you what you are today. A winner, KVFD.
Divine Intervention at AM 1400 KVFD, where Fort Dodge talk.
Let my people go. Fear not. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. After this day, you shall see his chariots no more. No! You'll be dead under them. The Lord of hosts will do battle for us. Behold his mighty hand.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
Yeah, Charlton Heston is Moses. What, you didn't know that? Oh, yeah. Charlton Heston's Moses. Thought since I was talking with the pastor here, we'd bring out some biblical stuff there.
Yeah, you know, he wrote the beginning of the Bible after all, right?
Yeah,
Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston, absolutely. You know? And then he was going to have a rifle picked from his cold dead hand, and it was a pretty interesting guy, really. I thought, but anyway, our guest is Pastor Austin Hill of the First Presbyterian Church. We try to muddle through and understand a little bit how to respond to some of the things that happen in our world as Christian people. And I don't know if we're what are we deciding? I don't know if we're getting anything done here now, other than to condemn the ugliness in our world.
Well, I think it's got to start with condemning the ugliness in the world and not condemning people who we think are ugly. And what I mean by that is kind of what we were talking about a little bit before the break, that I think we've got to find ways to connect with people who we absolutely disagree with and who are completely different from us. And that is incredibly a difficult thing. And I know even within the Presbyterian Church, to tell a little bit of a personal story, our denomination in the last 15 years has had a lot of division within it as well. And if you go back and just look at the trajectory of the Presbyterians, tracing from their beginning in the United States, it's really a story of one split after the next. You know, there were the old school, the new school Presbyterians, the old side, the new side Presbyterians, and every one of those different controversies, and it seems like about every couple generations there's another split. And even as I was saying, the last 15, 20 years, there have been a lot of splits within our denomination. And when I was in seminary, learning about all this doctrine, not actually having done a whole lot of ministry side by side with other Presbyterian pastors, I was very outspoken about my beliefs. And how can anyone believe these certain doctrines and consider themselves to be a Christian? That's kind of my mentality. How can you believe anything like this and consider yourself to be a true Christian? Well, in the last 10 years of actually serving as a Presbyterian pastor and working with people who I don't agree with on a lot of things, I've come to see how God is using those people, how God is at work in their ministries, even if I don't always agree with them. And I've come to appreciate even some of the gifts that people bring, even when I totally disagree with them. And that hasn't come easily. That has come really only through a decade of working with people that I honestly 10 years ago would have just rather had not been coworkers with. And I wish that we could find more opportunities to build bridges like that. And I think one of the ways that happened in my own world, in our presbytery, we call it, this group of other Presbyterian pastors, was we found ways to retreat together, to get to know one another, to hear our stories. We didn't just show up to vote on things and show up at committee meetings where we were opponents, but we would actually we would worship God together. We would study scripture together. We would take communion together. We would have these experiences where you could see the humanity, you could see the passion, you could see maybe why this person got into ministry, even if they seem so different from myself. And over a decade, that has really formed some tight bonds with people, even though I really disagree with a lot of their theology. And I would hope that we could do things like that in our positions of leadership in our country as well.
Should Christian people engage with business leaders? Should they engage with political figures to embrace the Christian message more? I'm talking about, of course, those who are already Christian. That has become kind of a taboo. All it's part of some sort of supremacist, it's an offense to multiculturalism or some damn thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think definitely Christians should be able to speak their mind clearly and unequivocally to those who are in power. Now, I think as we think of any relationship we have, if you don't know me, if you're not already invested in your relationship with me, you don't care at all what I have to say or what I think.
That's right.
You might not care what I think even if you do know me, but you certainly don't care about what I think if you don't have a relationship with me. And I think the church, especially in these culture wars, we have removed ourselves from the cultural conversations to such a degree that our opinion has become irrelevant. So no one even cares what we think. So I think maybe first a step is actually establishing some relationships with the business leaders and local political leaders, helping them see that I actually am interested in our town. I'm interested in our community. And maybe, just maybe after I've actually spent time with them, just getting to know them as people, they might actually care about what I have to think and how I think my faith impacts what we do. But if I just go in there saying, this is why you should care about the Christian worldview, and I can't even pronounce your name the right way, that's a waste of everyone's time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I went through that. I was so embarrassed with Dr. Megan Srinivas, who's running for to replace Helen Miller. And, and I could not pronounce her last name correctly for quite a long time. I think I'm getting it down there. But yeah, that is just so...
Yeah.
That's just so embarrassing.
It is. And I think the Christians and the church in general have not done a good job, especially in the last 30 years, of engaging culture in any sort of meaningful way unless it's to condemn. And I think most people, they just don't have time for that. You know, they don't care about what the haters are going to say. You know, the haters are going to hate, so they're just going to keep doing what they do. And the church just gets kind of relegated into this world of, you know, being these condemnatory haters. And so I'm not advocating for the church giving up its voice, but maybe instead of always clamoring to be heard, we within the church can first do a better job of listening and serving and earning the right to be heard. Because I think it's clear that in our culture today, church does not have the benefit of the doubt that it once had 50, 75 years ago, where people just implicitly respected the opinion of church authority structures.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have to earn that today.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. There are times in this last Kavanaugh thing and this last Supreme Court fiasco, if you want to ask me. And I wonder why it happens just with conservative justices. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Sotomayor, Elena Kagan. There was some grumbling, but I mean, Justice Ginsburg was a abortion attorney for the ACLU and had written extensively about the legalizing abortion and making sure that legalization of abortion stayed on the book. And she passed 96-0.
Wow.
Yeah. 96 votes in favor. And we have somebody who may roll back some of the excesses of abortion laws. I don't think they'll ever ban abortion.
Sure.
But I would say it would be modified. And all hell broke.
Well, even the deciding vote, Susan Collins, right? And her support that she gave, I think, on Saturday was because she was sure that Brett Kavanaugh would not roll back Roe v. Wade. As if that's the most important reason why she should decide to confirm or deny this candidate in the midst of everything else that's been going on. And still, that was the thing that decided it for her, was that, you know, she was sure that he wasn't going to roll back Roe v. Wade. And to your point, I mean, that just, it's astounding that that a political posture like that is the main reason why people were you know, in such an uproar. Was, you know, what's he going to vote on abortion? I mean, that's the way that it was described the entire time. This is going to be the end of abortion if he makes it.
And women are going to be enslaved, and they're all men, and men are terrible, and we need to smash the patriarchy. See, Christianity is part of the patriarchy. I mean, it's almost as if some of the protesters were opposed to Western civilization itself. And in some cases, I think they were.
Well, and certainly the cultural heritage of Western civilization. I mean, many of the things that brought the West where they are, hands down, that they were, you know, actively against. So, yeah, I mean, I think as we look at what to do moving forward, I think still any way we can try to humanize the people we disagree with.
Well, that would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Not forgetting that they're human.
Like, I almost wonder what would happen.
That's a low bar.
Yeah, I know.
One.
But I think when we are at our worst, it's because of those thoughts, you know, that we demonize the opponents. And it's that much easier to be a jerk. It's that much easier to eschew your moral scruples when you don't believe the person you're attacking has any dignity at all.
Advocates, political activists don't care about objective truth. They care about presenting their side. They want to move the ball forward, whatever it is, whatever the cause is. All they're going to respond to is their side. We should do this because of this and this and this, and there is no other point of view. That's a political activist. Christianity, by its nature, demands tolerance and love and understanding and respect. So Christians are really in the barrel, or 5 yards behind or more, right off the bat. You know? I don't know if Christians should stand a little firmer for their faith, if that's the answer, and not be ashamed to say that this is the revealed truth, or that objective truth comes from God. Some Christians believe that. I happen to believe.
Yeah,
I happen to believe that truth is found through the study of God's word.
Yeah.
I mean, that's traditional Christian thinking.
Certainly.
I mean, the study of science, of course, should go on. I mean, our world has changed and benefited so much from science, and it will continue to. Your dad's a scientist.
Yeah.
He told me a couple of times he was a plasma engineer. I still don't know what it is. But he was, he was a Christian man and found no contradiction in his life at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, so far away. I would have been interested in talking with him more.
Yeah.
But anyway, the question I have for you then is, and then we're going to remember your wife's.
Sure.
The question I have for you then is: should Christians not be? I don't know if that's the way I want to ask it. Should they stand stronger in their Christian faith? Should they be unashamed to say, this is in Scripture?
I don't think Christians should be ashamed for what they believe and why. And I think they should be able to advocate very clearly for why they believe what they believe. Mm-hmm. I do believe if they have to make moral compromises to get more power for Christians or Christian ideals, I think that's going too far. And if I look at Jesus and what Jesus was about, he was actively, continually giving up his power, even though he was ushering in a new kingdom. And what was so perplexing to his followers was that the kingdom he was bringing in was not a political kingdom. It was not one where he was going to steal power from Rome or, finally bring the Jews back into a position of significance. And that, I think, is really hard for us as Christians because we are no longer as significant as we once were. And I think, like the Jews of Jesus' day, our temptation is to try to gain some of that societal power and influence again. Now, certainly Jesus was very forthcoming with what he believed and could defend it better than anyone. So I don't think, we just have to be a doormat and be silent, but he was willing to let the chips fall where they may, and he was ultimately killed for what he believed and for the kingdom he was bringing in. So his success looked nothing like the success that we might think.
That's interesting. Let's talk about Pastor Sarah.
Sure.
Pastor Sarah Hill will be making a call for a women's event. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, on October 27th. I believe that's a Saturday. And we're hoping to have her on, maybe spend a little bit of time on the show. And so there's a women's event coming up on that October 27th. It's called Nurture Her Soul, and it's for women of any kind of church background. It's not just for Presbyterians, and it's actually Sarah at the Presbyterian Church and Reverend Andrea Krauschar from the Methodist Church. They've been working together planning this. They're bringing in a guest speaker. Her name is Mandy Sullivan. So there's going to be some music, some food, refreshments, guest speaker talking about women's faith issues, and people from all backgrounds are invited. I think it's 6 p.m. on that Saturday, the 27th.
It would have been good to have Pastor Sarah Hill here today. Actually, I never thought to invite her, and maybe that's deeply revealing about it.
Well, there's always next week.
And there's always next week. So she will be here next week.
Yeah,
you and her will be here.
Sure.
Well, that's terrific. And I've heard some disturbing things that have come out of these activist movements that women who are married are selling out.
Well, you could have a lot of fun because both Sarah and I, we don't see eye to eye on all these Kavanaugh things.
Name me a husband and wife that did or do. I mean, really, come on.
So you might have a lot of fun with us.
No, I will. Pastor Austin Hill of the First Presbyterian Church is our guest. Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure.
All right, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, KVFD Fort Dodge.
This is Gary Rima, the voice of the UNI Panthers, and you can listen to exciting Panther sports right here on the Voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400, KVFD.
Florida, suddenly bracing for a hurricane. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News. Michael could hit the Panhandle as a Category 3 hurricane early Wednesday. It was only named yesterday.
It is going to be a big storm, and it's been intensifying quickly from a tropical storm this morning now to that hurricane Category 1 just off the coast of Cuba. It's going to be running over warm water, and that's going to allow it to strengthen. We already have advisories being issued, and a hurricane watch is in place from Pensacola, stretching all the way to the Big Bend of Florida, and that is where we're at least currently looking at the best chance to seeing some of these hurricane-type conditions.
Fox meteorologist Adam Klotz, storm surge and heavy rain are big concerns, especially when the remnants head inland toward areas recently flooded by Hurricane Florence.
FEMA's getting prepared, and it looks like a big one. Can you believe it? It looks like another big one.
The president urging residents to heed local warnings as he spoke in Florida at a police chief's convention, a quick trip. He's due back in Washington at this hour to be part of the ceremonial swearing in for Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh later today. A deadly limo crash over the weekend in upstate New York is under state and federal investigation. Fox's Gernal Scott has this live.
At least 20 people, 18 in the car and 2 outside, were killed. Autopsies are being done to see if alcohol was a factor, but New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says they're also looking at responsibility for putting people in a car that didn't pass state inspection.
The owner of the company, in my opinion, because there'll be legal consequences, but the owner of the company had no business putting a failed vehicle on the road.
Prestige Limos has not responded. Federal investigators say the way the limo was rebuilt may have also violated the law. An investigation to find a cause continues, Lisa.
Thanks, Gernal. The Dow up 41 points at the closing bell, rebounding from a triple-digit slide earlier in the day. This is Fox News.
When it's too cold for camping, we go camping. When it's too hot to work, we work. The John Deere Gator XUV 835 comes with game-changing heat and AC and 3 wide seating, so it's never too anything for anything. Nothing runs like the strong, and nothing runs like a Deere. Visit your John Deere dealer to test drive today. Get $400 off the Gator XUV 835M at participating John Deere dealers now through October 26, 2018. See your dealer for details.
To experience relief from muscle cramps in your legs and feet, use TheraWorks Relief. This non-greasy foam is proven to relieve muscle cramps fast and reduce muscle soreness. TheraWorks Relief can also prevent muscle cramps before they start, so you can get a full night's sleep without having to worry about muscle cramps. TheraWorks Relief only takes minutes to apply, absorbs quickly, and it works. TheraWorks Relief is a life-changing product, and you don't even need a prescription. Get TheraWorks Relief today in the pain relief aisle at Walmart, CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens pharmacies, or TheraWorksRelief.com.
Is shutting down Google+, its social media platform, while also announcing new data privacy measures after a recent privacy breach it did not announce.
Close to 500,000 users of the Google+ social network may have had their personal data leaked. Personal data like phone numbers, email addresses, previous home addresses, and direct messages exposed. And even worse, according to the Wall Street Journal, Google didn't alert the users or even disclose the issue because they were worried that it would draw more regulatory scrutiny and hurt its reputation.
Fox Business Network's Susan Lee. Google says the issue was a bug giving access to outside data providers this spring, but that none of the thresholds for public notification were met, emphasizing there was no consumer information misused, no evidence of that. The 2 candidates for California governor have their one and only debate earlier today.
Democratic candidate Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom linked his opponent John Cox to President Trump on climate change and immigration when asked by a KQED listener about sanctuary cities.
He parrots in almost every opportunity Donald Trump and Trumpism, and Trump would have an advocate in Sacramento if he becomes the next governor.
Republican John Cox said Newsom, who's been in public office for 16 years, is just the status quo. Nothing new, nothing will change.
My opponent is for the gas tax. His answer for the housing crisis is more government spending.
Cox trails Newsom in all polling, and in some by double digits. He has asked for more debates. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
One worker doing routine maintenance is being blamed for accidentally overpressurizing the natural gas lines in a Massachusetts town today that led to service being shut down temporarily for hundreds of customers. This only weeks after deadly fires and explosions in 3 other Massachusetts towns where too much pressure was also suspected, but the cause remains under investigation. I'm Lisa Brady, and this is Fox News.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. One person was killed, several hurt in a house fire Sunday in the central Iowa town of Huxley. Radio Iowa's Matt Kelly reports.
3 residents of the house suffered from smoke inhalation and 1 died from it. That was 47-year-old Brett Van Ursvelde. He and 44-year-old Julie McLean were trying to get their 17-year-old son from his bedroom when the first responders arrived. McLean is hospitalized, as is the teen. 2 girls managed to escape with no injuries, though a Huxley police officer and a Story County Sheriff's deputy were hurt. It's believed the fire started in the kitchen. The state fire marshal is investigating. Radio Iowa, I'm Matt Kelly.
A new facility called an intermodal hub has been proposed for downtown Fort Dodge that would link the Warden Plaza and Cultural Recreation Center that has also been proposed for the city. The intermodal hub would offer parking and a connection between various forms of transportation. The estimated cost of the project is $11.5 million, and city government is asking for a $7.63 million grant to help pay for it. December 18th is the date that the city will find out if they've received the grant. If awarded, construction could begin in 2020 and be finished in the spring of 2021. The facility would be at First Avenue South in Fort Dodge. The continued wet weather may prove to be problematic for farmers wanting to harvest their crop. Iowa State University Extension grain quality specialist Charlie Herberg believes the wet conditions add a new issue to the harvest.
It's just been a difficult fall, and now we're going to have mold problems in the field for sure. And farmers need to scout their fields, look to see which hybrids or which fields seem to be more and less affected by mold problems and harvest them first.
Herberg says the condition of this year's grain is slightly below last year's harvest. He says for long-term storage of grain, corn moisture needs to be around 15% moisture, and for soybeans, the moisture content should be around 10 to 12%. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker urged fellow Democrats in Iowa this weekend to stay faithful despite hurt and angry feelings in the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court fight.
It is not a time to give up. It's a time to get up, to rise up, to speak up. It's time for you not to wait for hope, but to be the hope.
Booker was the keynote speaker at the Iowa Democratic Party's Fall Gala fundraiser Saturday night. He flew to Des Moines immediately after casting his no vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Booker is scheduled to campaign with Iowa Democrats in Adel, Boone, North Liberty, and Davenport. A registered sex offender in Iowa faces new charges after investigators say he molested several young boys on camping trips to a Story County park. KCCI reports that 30-year-old Michael Ferguson took several boys between the ages of 9 and 4 camping at Hickory Grove Park in Colo. Court documents say Ferguson forced at least 4 children to perform sexual acts. Ferguson was recently arrested in Stark County, Ohio, and extradited to Story County. He's charged with 2 counts of second-degree sexual abuse, assault with intent to commit sexual abuse, and indecent exposure. He's being held in lieu of $500,000 bail. Ferguson was convicted of assault with the intent to commit sexual abuse of a teenage boy in 2008. This has been Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. Have a great day.
Here's the AM 1400 KVFD weatherology forecast. Scattered thunderstorms likely this afternoon, otherwise overcast. High temperatures reach up to 68, south winds 5 to 10 miles per hour. Scattered thunderstorms likely tonight, lows level off around 58, cloudy skies. Scattered thunderstorms again tomorrow, high temperatures reach up to 66. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. Currently, it's 61.
The opinions and remarks expressed on this radio program by the host, guests, and call-in listeners are the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not reflect the views of management or ownership of KVFD AM 1400.
When one door closes, another door opens. I said, another door opens. Another door opens.
Door issues? P&R Entry Doors will come to your business and replace your hollow metal entry door fast. And if your garage door is giving you fits, P&R Entry Doors will handle that too. Family owned and operated for 30 years. For a free estimate, call 573-8883. Online at pndrentrydoors.com.
Thinking about life insurance? What if you could make one free phone call and learn your best price from nearly a dozen highly rated price competitive companies? Well, that's exactly what happens when you call SelectQuote Life. For example, George is 40. He was getting sky-high quotes from other companies because he takes meds to control his blood pressure. But when I shopped around, I found him a 10-year, $500,000 policy for under $25 a month. I'm SelectQuote agent Dan Savino. And believe me, if SelectQuote isn't shopping for your life insurance, you're probably paying too much.
For your free quote, call 800-573-9552. That's 800-573-9552. 800-573-9552. Or go to SelectQuote.com. Since 1985, we shop, you save.
Get full details on the example policy at SelectQuote.com/commercials. Or price could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states.
Domestic violence thrives in silence, but if we take a stand and work together, we can end domestic violence. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and purple is the color of domestic violence awareness. Let everyone know you are paying attention and taking action to end domestic violence by wearing purple this month. You can also help break the silence by coming to the Candlelight Vigil Thursday night, October 18th at 6 p.m. at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Fort Dodge. Please join DSOC in the fight to end domestic violence.
Divine Intervention at AM 1400 KVFD, where Fort Dodge talk.
Because you are a disgusting fat body, Private Pile.
If you don't listen to him, you suck.
He's sneaky, but he's right.
Michael Devine at AM 1400 KVFD.
That's right. Sneaky, whatever. 312 at AM 1400 KVFD.
Got my chips cashed in.
This week on the Iowa Watch Connection,
I will tell you that the Democratic chair and the Republican chair, we may disagree on a whole lot of things, but we do not disagree on how important this is for the state.
it's a uniquely Iowa phenomenon.
It's going to be far more inclusive everywhere. And that excites me because I think that's good for Democrats and it's good for democracy.
But it's about to undergo some changes.
This just continues that process and tries to make sure that we can have a process that's open, honest, transparent, and allows as many people to participate as possible.
Iowa's presidential precinct caucuses, our topic this week.
The Iowa Watch Connection is presented by the Iowa Center for Public Affairs Journalism, online at iowawatch.org. Here is Jeff Stein.
A full 50 years ago, following the tumultuous 1968 election campaign, national Democrats sought to make the presidential nomination process more transparent, placing more power in the hands of voters instead of party leaders. Iowa Democrats adapted their precinct caucus system to elect delegates at the most local level, from precincts to county conventions, from there to district conventions, then to the state convention, and finally to the national convention. In order to go through that many steps, given technological limitations of the time, Iowa's 1972 caucuses were held on January 24th, and soon a first-in-the-nation tradition took hold. But after each election cycle, Iowa has to fight to keep its status, and as former state party chair and former Congressman Dave Nagel notes, it's led to a long alliance with New Hampshire, which holds the first primary in the nation every 4 years.
New Hampshire conducts a primary, which is state government run. Iowa conducts a caucus, which is run by the political parties. The state government is not involved. And that is as it should be, because the state government in New Hampshire says we'll hold your selection process for you, but we won't tell you what to do. But this ultimately is a choice of the Iowa Democratic Party and the Republican Party in terms of how we want to select our nominee, not told by the government who we should select or tilted towards one candidate or another. But therein lies the problem. The DNC can't do anything to New Hampshire. They've tried in years past, but it's a state-run process, and Bill Gardner is adamant that he's going to be first primary in the nation, as he should be. We, on the other hand, are a creature requires the approval not of the state of Iowa, but our governing body, the Democratic National Committee. And so they set us on a road for conflict with New Hampshire by two requirements, one of which I think can be met and the other I'm not sure can. First is that we conduct a precinct caucus as a selection process, and we use delegates selected to the state convention or the county convention as a measuring stick of success for a candidate. whoever gets the most delegates to the county convention, percentage-wise, wins the Iowa Democratic Caucus. New Hampshire is just absolutely adamant that we cannot go to a straw poll. They allow the Republicans to do so because they did that when this thing was originally created. So the DNC has now required Iowa to release raw totals as well as delegate equivalencies or delegate counts. So Iowa and New Hampshire, which with the PAC have never crowded each other. Once we do, we lose. Both of us will lose. Are now in a situation where the DNC has set up a conflict with New Hampshire for Iowa that we're going to have to try to work out. But at this point, we don't have any resolution of that.
Now, the Democratic National Committee has issued guidelines for the 2020 Iowa caucuses. I spoke to DNC Chair Tom Perez on September 24th about them.
We want to make sure that it's easier for people to participate. If you're a veteran and you're deployed overseas, that shouldn't preclude you from participating not only in the Iowa caucus, but in any caucus. If you are a person with a disability and you have a mobility impairment, you should make sure that any caucus site is accessible. If you are a shift worker or you have family care responsibilities, you should be able to participate. And we're working very closely with the party, and they have been exceedingly responsive. They were part of the group who helped us put together the series of reforms. And what happens when we're making these processes more inclusive is that more people participate. And that's what we want to do. Democrats want to make it easier for folks to vote. They want to make it easier for folks to participate. You look at what Republicans do across this country. They pass these horrible voter ID laws to make it harder for folks to participate. They're purging voters at ballot boxes. They're doing nothing in the White House in the face of Russian interference with elections. These are really important things, and I'm very confident that we're going to see a very robust caucus in 2020, and it's going to be far more inclusive everywhere, and that excites me because I think that's good for Democrats and it's good for democracy.
So Iowa and New Hampshire have made peace in terms of the changes in Iowa will not undermine the New Hampshire process. I know that was one of the concerns that folks in New Hampshire had.
I'm confident we can thread that needle. Very confident.
That all may be easier said than done, given the possible conflict between longtime allies Iowa and New Hampshire. But as Dave Nagel told me on October 5th, he has some ideas.
One thought that I had is that we can release raw totals, but not until after New Hampshire has held its process. And then try to get the Secretary of New Hampshire to agree that absentee ballot participation is not the same as a raw total. And hopefully that'll thread the needle. About half the people that supported Sanders think we ought to go to a primary in June because that would be fair and Bernie would have won. And half of them think we shouldn't be first anyway because, after all, who are we to tell the rest of the country what to do? Which goes back to the fundamental question, why do we start in small states? And they don't care. So we have a division inside our own party.
The Democrats don't go it alone on this. Since 1976, Iowa Republicans have held similar but procedurally distinctive caucuses of their own, first in the nation, on the same night as the Democrats. The in-state alliance is important, as Republican Party of Iowa Chair Jeff Kaufman told me on September 27th. Talk about the relationship between the Republican Party of Iowa and the Iowa Democratic Party in working together to ensure that Iowa retains its status, and how has what they've been doing impacted what you're doing?
Absolutely. On any given day, I could literally have to send out a fairly strong, proactive contrast tweet that involves the Democratic Party, and then an hour later, talk about how we're going to join forces to make sure that our First of the Nation caucuses run well. It's the nature of this job. You don't take the negatives personally, and you have to realize that any given day it may go attack, get along, back and forth. Ultimately, what the Democrats' fate in First of the Nation, and they had a higher hill to climb in this, given the fact that there was a little bit more resistance to Iowa in the National Democratic Party. And I'll be honest with you, it's a lot easier this year with us. Donald Trump early on told me that we were going to be first in the nation. I mean, he looked me in the eye and said that. And every step of the way, like Donald Trump or not like Donald Trump, once again, kept his promise on First of the Nation. So I felt confident the entire way through, but I got to tell you, I was sincerely in the background rooting that Troy Price and the National Democrats were going to make sure that we were first in the nation. That's going to happen again. Now, Troy Price and I, the Democratic chair and I, we have to make sure that our caucuses run smoothly. We have the national glare on us. He has a bit more challenging situation because he's going to have a lot of candidates in here. And there's going to be candidates that are going to emerge and get a bump out of Iowa. My role is going to be making sure that independents realize that there is, the flaws in those Democrats coming through, but never are my words going to interfere with the ability of the Democrats to carry out their caucuses in a fair way. That would be irresponsible on my part and for this state. So yeah, it's the part of my job. It's about 25% of the job, and we must have a strong relationship between the two parties. Troy is my fourth Democratic chair that I've worked with, and honestly, every single one of them, there has been an element of trust. I think that the people of Iowa would be really proud to know what's happening behind the scenes, because I will tell you that the Democratic chair and the Republican chair, we may disagree on a whole lot of things, but we do not disagree on how important this is for the state.
I'm joined now by Aaron Murphy, Des Moines Bureau Chief for Lee Enterprises. From your perspective, covering the caucuses and the capital city, what might some of these changes do to the process and how Democrats in particular approach it as individuals are running for president?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I don't know that it'll change a whole lot as far as I'm thinking specifically of the people who show up to caucus and how they decide which candidate they're going to support and all those sorts of things. I don't know that it'll have a huge influence on that. This is such an open process. You're literally standing in a room in front of everybody else declaring who you're supporting. I don't see any reason that would change, that these changes would affect how people approach that. The one big thing that it does change is, especially depending on how the absentee process works, is now that enters into someone's equation. I don't have to be there at 7 o'clock on this Tuesday night in the middle or in early February in the middle of winter. If I want to just send in an absentee ballot, I have that option now. That I assume will definitely factor into caucus goers' calculus. So that could be interesting to see. Caucus, how much that impacts caucus night turnout and overall numbers. Do we get more people overall, but fewer actually at the caucuses on caucus night? That could be interesting to watch.
There is a sense, though, that if you do broaden it beyond that night, in other words, opening up more of the absentee process, it may change how candidates approach things, but I'm not sure it will change it markedly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And again, the absentee thing being the biggest factor there, it'll be interesting to see how much candidates push that. That this is unique to a caucus situation. We know in normal elections, primaries and general elections, that campaigns make pushing early voting a huge deal. So now that that's an option in the caucuses, will they push that here in the caucuses, or will Iowa Democrats see something like that as unseemly towards the caucuses? Like, will they push back at someone saying, hey, don't bother going to the caucuses. You can vote absentee and you're secured. Iowa Democrat may not like that suggestion. So that's going to be fascinating for me to watch too.
Caucuses have multiple purposes, one of which, of course, is to begin the delegate selection process. That's the primary function of why they're held. But it is also a party building operation. The idea to work one-on-one with individuals, develop a deeper base. Are these changes, in your mind, going to enhance that party building or potentially have a negative effect on it, especially with the possibility of absentee?
Yeah, I could see that going either way. You know, you would think at the base of it, an absentee vote, maybe the option to vote absentee, maybe gets more people involved in the process, and as such, get more people involved within the party, which would be good for the party. But, you know, you're still not getting someone in the room that night. You're engaged, but you're not in the room. So do Democrats still think that's a good thing, or is there concern that kind of creates an option that creates some disconnect that doesn't keep someone as involved as they otherwise would be by showing up? So that's absolutely an interesting question to see what kind of impact that absentee option has on the party building aspect.
Aaron, thanks for the insight. Aaron Murphy is Des Moines Bureau Chief for Lee Enterprises. He spoke to us from his office in the Des Moines metro area via Skype. Coming up, we'll talk one-on-one at length with the chair of the Iowa Democratic Party about what the caucus changes mean for voters and the party. That's next as the Iowa Watch Connection continues.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
It's 3:27, 27 minutes after 3 o'clock, 54 degrees. News and weather is next.
Nerves of steel. If you've come to test our metal, you better tighten up your chin strap. Get amped up for all the gridiron action on the Panther Sports Network.
University of Northern Iowa Sports are brought to you on the Voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400 KVFD, by Mitch Lund State Farm, Party Productions, The Other Store, and New Age Media. Catch UNI Sports right here on the Voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400 KVFD.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Benzgal with the KVFD Afternoon News. One person was killed, several hurt in a house fire Sunday in the central Iowa town of Huxley. Radio Iowa's Matt Kelly reports.
3 residents of the house suffered from smoke inhalation and 1 died from it. That was 47-year-old Brett Van Ersvelde. He and 44-year-old Julie McLean were trying to get their 17-year-old son from his bedroom when the first responders arrived. McLean is hospitalized, as is the teen. 2 girls managed to escape with no injuries, though a Huxley police officer and a Story County Sheriff's deputy were hurt. It's believed the fire started in the kitchen. The state fire marshal is investigating. Radio Iowa, I'm Matt Kelly.
A new facility called an intermodal hub has been proposed for downtown Fort Dodge that would link the Warden Plaza and Cultural Recreation Center that has also been proposed for the city. The intermodal hub would offer parking and a connection between various forms of transportation. The estimated cost of the project is $11.5 million, and city government is asking for a $7.63 million grant to help pay for it. December 18th is the date that the city will find out if they've received the grant. If awarded, construction could begin in 2020 and be finished in the spring of 2021. The facility would be at First Avenue South in Fort Dodge. The continued wet weather may prove to be problematic for farmers wanting to harvest their crop. Iowa State University Extension grain quality specialist Charlie Herberg believes the wet conditions add a new issue to the harvest.
It's just been a difficult fall, and now we're going to have mold problems in the field for sure. And farmers need to scout their fields, look to see which hybrids or which fields seem to be more and less affected by mold problems and harvest them first.
Herberg says the condition of this year's grain is slightly below last year's harvest. He says for long-term storage of grain, corn moisture needs to be around 15% moisture, and for soybeans, the moisture content should be around 10 to 12%. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker urged fellow Democrats in Iowa this weekend to stay faithful despite hurt and angry feelings in the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court fight.
It is not a time to give up. It's a time to get up, to rise up, to speak up, It's time for you not to wait for hope, but to be the hope.
Booker was the keynote speaker at the Iowa Democratic Party's Fall Gala fundraiser Saturday night. He flew to Des Moines immediately after casting his no vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Booker is scheduled to campaign with Iowa Democrats in Adel, Boone, North Liberty, and Davenport. A registered sex offender in Iowa faces new charges after investigators say he molested several young boys on camping trips to a Story County park. KCCI reports that 30-year-old Michael Ferguson took several boys between ages of 9 and 4 camping at Hickory Grove Park in Colo. Court documents say Ferguson forced at least 4 children to perform sexual acts. Ferguson was recently arrested in Stark County, Ohio, and extradited to Story County. He's charged with 2 counts of second-degree sexual abuse, assault with intent to commit sexual abuse, and indecent exposure. He's being held in lieu of $500,000 bail. Ferguson was convicted of assault with the intent to commit sexual abuse of a teenage boy in 2008. This has been Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. Have a great day.
Here's the AM 1400 KVFD Weatherology forecast. Scattered thunderstorms likely this afternoon, otherwise overcast. High temperatures reach up to 68, south winds 5 to 10 miles per hour. Scattered thunderstorms likely tonight, lows level off around 58, cloudy skies. Scattered thunderstorms again tomorrow, high temperatures reach up to 66. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. Currently, it's 61.
This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge 331. Obituaries this hour brought to us by Loftus Filer Seavers Funeral Home. By Loftus Filer Seavers Funeral Home and Cremation Services at 307 South 12th Street, Fort Dodge. You may contact Loftus Filer Seavers Funeral Home and Cremation Services by calling 515-576-3156 or online at www.loftusfilerseaversfuneralhome.com. I'm sorry to report the passing of my old friend. Many people remember fondly Philip Edwin Joslin. Died over the weekend at the age of 80. Services for Philip Edwin Joslin, a great golfer and a great guy, will be held at a later date. Mary Jane Buckley has died at the age of 87. There will be a service Wednesday morning at 10 at Loftus Filer Seavers Funeral Home, then at 10:30 at Corpus Christi Catholic Church for Mary Jean Buckley. Edward M. DeBakey has died at the age of 95. Services are pending. Edward Jacobson, also known as George Jacobson, has died at the age of 87. Services are pending. Obituaries this hour brought to us by Loftus Filer Seavers Funeral Home and Cremation Services at 307 South 12th Street, Fort Dodge. You may contact Loftus Filer Seavers Funeral Home and Cremation Services by calling 515-576-3156 or online at www.loftusfilerseaversfuneralhome.com. It's 3:33 at AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. With a look at the closing market report, here's Dwayne Murley.
Here's a look at how the markets closed today. December corn down 1 3/4 at 366.5. March down 1 1/2 at 378.5. May corn down 1 3/4 at 385.25, and July down 1 1/2 at 390 3/4. November soybeans up 3/4 cent at 869 3/4. January up 1/2 penny at 883. March up 1/2 cent at 894 3/4. May up 1/4 penny at 907 3/4. December wheat closed down 7 cents at 514. Soybean meal down 140 a ton at 314.20. October live cattle up 37 cents at 114.17. December up a dime at 118 1/4. October feeders down a dime at 157.67. November up 20 cents at 158.42. October lean hogs up 1/4 at 68.45, and December closed unchanged at 57.55. I'm Dwayne Murley.
What is the red liquid at the bottom of a meat package? It isn't blood. Hi, I'm Julie Harker with Healthy Living on Brownfield. Packaged fresh meat is about 75% water. Meat scientist Greg Renfro says the liquid at the bottom is a combination of water and myoglobin.
That fluid at the bottom of the package is actually water leaching out of the piece of meat, taking with it some of that myoglobin and giving it that red or pinkish appearance.
The liquid's color can vary, but Renfro says it's nothing to be worried about.
A lot of people ask me, what's the deal with pork's blood? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it's pink. Well, no, pork's blood is red, but pigs don't have as much myoglobin at the time we harvest them as cattle do. You know, pigs we harvest at about 5 to 6 months of age. Cattle are around 16 to 18 months of age. So as an animal gets older, they develop more myoglobin.
Buddy says the liquid in a meat package can carry the same bacteria as raw meat and should be handled and disposed of carefully.
Classic example we always talk about is somebody that cuts up their meat on a cutting board, and then they just wipe it off, and then they cut up their salad. Well, if there was a pathogen on that piece of meat, I'm going to cook it and kill it. However, we don't cook salad, so the opportunity to destroy that pathogen is not there.
Redfro says people should follow food safety measures and wash their hands before and after touching raw meat. I'm Julie Harker with Healthy Living on Brownfield.
If you're talking, they will hear you.
Why are we getting killed like this?
Kyle's not here. Got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. 0 tolerance. He's out for the season.
Harsh.
Hey, he knew not to drink. We've made that clear to all of our kids, right?
No, not really.
Bill, if we don't tell them what we expect and why they shouldn't drink, how are they going to know?
Talk. They hear you. For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Building relationships during recovery from mental and substance use disorders can put the strength of family and community behind you. We're all connected, offering encouragement, support, and hope. Join the Voices for Recovery. Strengthen families and communities.
For confidential information,
First State Bank, first for you.
Switching banks can be overwhelming, but when you switch to First State Bank, their personal bankers will walk you through the entire process and take away all your confusion. Their personal bankers are top-notch in customer service. They're always first for you. The friendly bank in your hometown is First State Bank. Online at fsbwc.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing and Equal Opportunity Lender.
First State Bank, first for you.
So here's a story that may sound familiar. I used to post to several job boards, only to be overwhelmed with tons of the wrong resumes.
And because there were so many resumes,
it was tough to separate the great candidates from those who weren't the best fit. I mean, it's not easy to find the right person for
my wineries,
my sports medicine business,
our global PR agencies.
That old process was definitely
not smart. Then I went to ZipRecruiter. They figured out hiring.
ZipRecruiter did the work for me. Their powerful matching technology scanned thousands of resumes to identify people with the right skills, education, and experience for my job.
And actively invited them to apply.
So I got qualified candidates fast. Smart.
See why ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. Try ZipRecruiter now for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free. Once again, ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter. The smartest way to hire. Based on Trustpilot rating of hiring sites with over 1,000 reviews.
When Pioneer says we're with you from the word go, we mean it.
I'm Dave Hine, your local Pioneer sales rep here in Granville, Iowa.
He's proud to carry on the family tradition.
I take a lot of pride in being a third-generation Pioneer sales rep. My wife, Nikki, and I began partnering with Pioneer in 1995. And my family really is the local Pioneer presence as we're entering our 70th year of working with area farmers.
Connecting with growers and understanding their needs comes natural to Dave.
I enjoy walking fields with our neighbors and providing product recommendations based on what we're seeing in the field. We look to be the trusted advisor for area farmers.
Like hundreds of other Pioneer sales representatives in Iowa, he's bringing global resources to local growers.
Pioneer provides us with a lot of great resources. The local Northwest Iowa team allows us to understand our products better than any other company.
Visit your area Pioneer sales representative for more local information.
I'm Dave Hine. We've been with you for over 70 years, and we're with you from the word go.
Take the worry out of winter with a winter weather advisor on KVFD, brought to you by Community Health Center Fort Dodge, offering dental, behavioral health, and general medical assistance for men, women, and children. They're committed to your well-being. Community Health Center. Get to know them. And Creative Cakes, making life sweet with espresso, lunch, gourmet cupcakes, and other sweet treats. Creative Cakes in the Crossroads Mall, Fort Dodge. They make life sweet. Listen for the winter weather advisor on the Voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400 KVFD.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
The Iowa Watch Connection radio program is part of a statewide audience engagement project organized by the Iowa Center for Public Affairs Journalism, an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization. The center is dedicated to producing high-quality investigative and community affairs journalism in Iowa, while also training journalism students to do this work at a high ethical level. The center is found online at iowawatch.org.
Welcome back to the Iowa Watch Connection. I'm Jeff Stein. We continue our discussion of possible changes to the 2020 Iowa presidential precinct caucuses now with Troy Price, chair of the Iowa Democratic Party. We spoke at the party's headquarters in West Des Moines on September 27th.
As we're approaching this conversation, the one thing that we want to do is make sure that we preserve and protect the spirit of the Iowa caucuses. And, at the end of the day, what the caucuses are is, we've never held ourselves out to be a primary. It's a neighborhood meeting. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter, who you are. Everyone can come to this event. And they can have a spirited debate about what the future of our country should be. And that's what caucuses have been. And so we want to make sure that we can preserve that. But what the DNC is asking us to do through the changes that were passed in August is there's several buckets, but the ones that kind of impact us the most here in Iowa will be, one, allowing for some form of absentee participation for those who will not be able to or could not attend. Two, reporting of the raw results from the first pre-alignment phase of the caucuses, ensuring that we have a recount procedure in place so that we can, if it's close and if a campaign requests it, that we can in fact recreate what happens in a caucus site and be able to make sure that the results are accurate. Those are really kind of the three big buckets that we are looking at as we go forward here. The other one too is that locking the caucus night result is the final result. So what has happened in years past is that, at the county level, if one side doesn't get their folks out, then it can change. And then it can change again at the district convention. That can change again at the state convention. And here, what happens on caucus night will be is the winner. And so from that point forward, then everything will be preserved going up through the chain. And so if it's projected that candidate X gets 4 delegates to the DNC, well, then they'll get 4 delegates to the DNC. So we've got to work through that.
If candidate X wins that many delegates in Iowa, but doesn't make it past South Carolina, doesn't make it past Florida, if they release their delegates, does that then open it up either for free connection or for some sort of apportionment, or am I premature in that?
I think that this is where the devil is going to be in the details. Yeah. We are also starting the process now. We're out doing some listening posts across the state to try and solicit feedback on how we might be able to do that and start thinking through this. We have until approximately, springtime, first part of spring, to be able to figure all this stuff out, get our delegate selection plans written and submitted to the DNC. And so for us, we're starting that process. It'll really pick up in earnest after Election Day. But we're in the process right now starting to think through that. So to answer your specific question, I don't know the answer to that yet. And other states where that has happened, we're going to have to go take a look at how other states have dealt with this when they have primaries, for example. In New Hampshire, there have been candidates who drop out shortly after New Hampshire, but they still have so many delegates that they were secured on that night. So we just go through that process, and so we'll figure out exactly how to do that.
One of the big sticking points, of course, has been how does Iowa stay distinctive from New Hampshire? And one of the concerns some had was if you report raw vote totals, then it's starting to look like New Hampshire. If you have an absentee process, it may be too much like New Hampshire. The first question is, do you think that our singular identity will remain pure? And secondly, are the folks in New Hampshire happy?
Well, for us, again, we want to preserve the spirit of the Iowa caucuses. And so we want to preserve that feeling where folks can come together and actually discuss this, because it's one of the few places in politics that you can actually do that anymore. And so we do want to make sure that, but we also want to make sure that we're giving folks the opportunity to have their voices heard. And for folks who may not be able to participate, that's always been a challenge in years past. And so we're going to take a really earnest look at how we might be able to make that happen. In terms of New Hampshire, I've traveled out there earlier this year, and I talked with their Secretary of State, and I stay in regular communication with my counterpart in New Hampshire. And so, we will continue to work with them and make sure that, as we're going through this process, keep them up to date. And, if there are any landmines that or challenges that might be further down the road that we're not seeing, make sure that we're keeping folks in the loop on that, so that the 4 early states have always worked really well together. Iowa and New Hampshire has definitely worked very well together over the last 30 years for sure. And so, we want to make sure that we are continuing that process and also continuing to work with our folks across the aisle here in the state. Obviously, the Republican process looks different than ours. It does report raw total, and they do allocate their delegates based upon that. And so for us, we want to, this is a lot of conversations go into this process, and it's not something that I get to decide or even our SEC just unilaterally gets to decide. We obviously want to make sure that people have a chance to have their voices heard in this conversation. If they have thoughts, something we haven't even thought about yet, hoping that we can solicit or, hear that feedback and hear those thoughts and be able to put that out there.
Troy Price, chair of the Iowa Democratic Party. We spoke in West Des Moines on September 27th. Some final words for context now from former state party chair and former Congressman Dave Nagel.
It was Daniel Webster, he of the dictionary fame, who wrote in the Federalist Papers. Most people don't realize he was a constitutionalist before he was a dictionary expert, that it's important in the democratic process that we talk to each other. And you put people in a room of all the persuasions of all of the candidates, and they talk to each other, and they have to declare their preference in public for who they're for, and hear why their neighbors are for somebody else. That's healthy. That's democracy at the lowest possible political denomination you can get. And I think that's important, particularly if it was important before. It's even more important now for the things I said when we started the show is we got to start talking to each other, and we got to start listening to each other.
And that brings us to the close of this week's program. We're back again next week at this same time. In the meantime, you can connect with us online, iowawatch.org. I'm Jeff Stein. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll make the Iowa Watch Connection again next week.
The Iowa Watch Connection is a copyrighted presentation of the Iowa Center for Public Affairs Journalism, which is solely responsible for its content. For more information about the center, including how you can contribute so high-quality investigative and community affairs journalism and student training can continue, go online, iowawatch.org.
Divine Intervention at AM 1400 KVFD, where Fort Dodge talk.
Who cares what people say about you? We love you.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
I remember a teacher that I had. Now, I went through the 7th grade. I went to the 7th grade. I left home when I was 10 years old because I was hungry. And I used to, this is true. I work in the summer, I go to school in the winter. But I had this one teacher. He was the principal of the Harrison School in Vincennes, Indiana. To me, this was the greatest teacher, a real sage of my time, anyhow. He had such wisdom. And we were all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance one day. And he walked over, this little old teacher, Mr. Laswell was his name. Mr. Laswell, and he says, I've been listening to you boys and girls recite the Pledge of Allegiance all semester. And it seems as though it's becoming monotonous to you. If I may I recite it and try to explain to you the meaning of each word. I, me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge, dedicate all of my worldly goods to give without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion to the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there's respect. because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts, freedom is everybody's job. United. That means that we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose. All divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united to a common purpose. And that's love for country. And to the Republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people. And it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands. One nation, meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right of power to live one's own life without threats, fear, or some sort of retaliation. And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others. For all, which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. And now, boys and girls, let me hear you recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since I was a small boy, 2 states have been added to our country, and 2 words have been added to the Pledge of Allegiance: under God. Wouldn't it be a pity if someone said that is a prayer and that would be eliminated from schools too?
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at jmike1400.
I walked through a county courthouse square. On a park bench, an old man was sitting there. I said, "Your old courthouse is kind of run down." He said, "No, it'll do for our little town." I said, "Your old flagpole has leaned a little bit, and that's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it." He said, "Have a seat." And I sat down. "Is this the first time you've been to our little town?" I said, "I think it is." He said, "I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And it got powder burned the night that Francis Scott Key said, watching it write and say, 'Can you see?' And it got a bad rip in New Orleans, with Pakenham and Jackson tugging at its seams. And it almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag, but she waved on, though. She got cut with a sword at Chancellorsville, and she got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, and Bragg, and the south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. On Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung limp and low a time or two. She was in Korea, Vietnam. She went where she was sent by her Uncle Sam. She waved from our ships upon the briny foam, and now they've about quit waving back here at home. In her own good land here, she's been abused. She's been burned, dishonored, denied, and refused. And the government for which she stands is scandalized throughout the land. And she's getting threadbare and she's wearing thin, but she's in good shape for the shape she's in. Because she's been through the fire before. And I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning. We take her down every night. We don't let her touch the ground, and we fold her up right. On second thought, I do like to brag, 'cause I'm mighty proud of that ragged old flag.
Michael Devine, broadcasting live.
Elvis is back. And this time he's bringing his friend Johnny Cash with him.
I hear the train coming.
Alpha Media presents the Elvis and Johnny Tribute with Joseph Hall and Paul Eve. Friday night, November 2nd in the Cardiff Center at Fort Frenzy.
Every time I hear newborn baby cry, because you're mine, I'll walk the line.
Doors open at 5:30 and the Elvis and Johnny Tribute starts at 7. Tickets are $25 in advance or $30 at the door. Get them now at Hy-Vee Fort Dodge, the Iowa Outdoor Store, or Fort Frenzy. Bring the whole family to see this tribute to the king of rock and roll and the man in black as Joseph Hall and Paul Eve present the Elvis and Johnny Tribute. Friday night, November 2nd at Fort Frenzy. Brought to you in part by Riley Armstrong Plumbing and Heating, J&M Construction in Bode, Cactus Family Farms, the Iowa Outdoor Store, and United Bank of Iowa in Fort Dodge, Rockwell City, and Pocahontas. The Elvis and Johnny Tribute is an Alpha Media event.
Divine Intervention at AM 1400 KVFD, where Fort Dodge talks.
Why are you marching, son? I'd really like to know. Because of Valley Forge, or perhaps the Alamo? Or won it by land, to it by sea? A trumpet's call, the will to be free? What of a man who stood straight and tall, who wept silent tears when he saw brave men fall? No matter, no difference, the blue or the gray, all were his brothers. How often he'd pray. And what of Antietam? That now peaceful stream where the water blood red glittered and gleamed. Appomattox, Chickamauga, Vicksburg, Bull Run, Cumberland, Gettysburg, and then Washington. Why are you marching, son? In Flanders Field, how proud were they whose forms beneath the poppies lay. Men who saw Verdun, who died at the Marne, Soissons, and those who tried the fearful foe at Chateauterre, who fought, bled, whose hearts grew weary, but in whose minds one thought kept churning, that the torch of liberty keep burning. Why are you marching, son? The plains swarmed in and the rising sun glowed fiercely on the evil done, men whose blood runs through our veins, men who died, remains lie forever locked in waters deep. Now is it right that they should sleep while the warm sea laps at a twisted hull and see the torch of liberty grow dull? Anzio, Casino, Mo, Saint-Mary-Glace, Limon, St. Lo, Garda Lake, and Buchenwald. On and on the roll is called. And why? Why are you marching, son? Bugles shrilled in the frozen night, and the first dawn, the awful sight. Seas of men, row after row, left to die on blood-stained snow. Busan, Pyongyang, Suwon, Gyeongju, and blood-red ran the swift Yalu. In South Vietnam, the big guns roared, and once again we fought a war. To honor a pledge our nation gave, to help that little country save her people from the certainty that she'd be ruled by tyranny. No matter where the big guns roar, our fighting men like those before, take the torch we all held dear and face freedom's enemies without fear. Our fathers died from sea to sea, blessed the torch of liberty. Why? Why are you marching, son?
From tuning an engine to replacing a fuse, you can learn it all under the hood. Heard every Saturday afternoon from 2 till 4 on the voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400 KVFD, Fort Dodge.
A second state of emergency over Hurricane Michael. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News. Alabama's governor just following in Florida's footsteps as the storm that was only named yesterday barrels north in the Gulf of Mexico, heading for the Panhandle.
Hurricane Michael poses a deadly threat, and as it grows stronger, we can expect it to make landfall as a major Category 3 storm on Wednesday along the Gulf Coast.
Florida Governor Rick Scott calls it a monstrous storm. Storm surge and heavy rain could also be a big problem further inland, so soon after the widespread flooding from Hurricane Florence. The latest advisory just in has Michael with top sustained winds of 80 miles an hour, a little over 500 miles from Apalachicola, Florida. President Trump reassuring Florida that FEMA is preparing for the storm. He's just arrived back in Washington for a special ceremony. Fox's John Decker live at the White House.
2 hours from now in the East Room, President Trump will ceremonially swear in Brett Kavanaugh as the 9th justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. He praised his nominee earlier today, speaking at a police chiefs convention in Orlando.
Just 2 days ago, the Senate confirmed a supremely qualified nominee who will be a faithful defender of the rule of law.
The ceremony follows perhaps the most contentious confirmation battle for a Supreme Court nominee in history. Kavanaugh will hear his first case on the high court tomorrow. Lisa?
Thanks, John. Federal investigators in upstate New York, where a limo crash over the weekend killed 20 people at an intersection with a history of vehicles running a stop sign and ending up in a store parking lot.
It used to be as you come down the hill, the road veered off to the left instead of the 90-degree angle that it intercepts 30A now.
NTSB Chair Robert Sumwalt moments ago, the limo had failed a state inspection last month and the driver wasn't licensed for that kind of vehicle. This is Fox News.
When it's too cold for camping, we go camping. When it's too hot to work, we work. The John Deere Gator XUV 835 comes with game-changing heat and AC and 3 wide seating, so it's never too anything for anything. Nothing runs like the strong, and nothing runs like a Deere. Visit your John Deere dealer to test drive today. Get $400 off the Gator XUV 835M at participating John Deere dealers now through October 26, 2018. See your dealer for details.
To experience relief from muscle cramps in your legs and feet, use TheraWorks Relief. This non-greasy foam is proven to relieve muscle cramps fast and reduce muscle soreness. TheraWorks Relief can also prevent muscle cramps before they start, so you can get a full night's sleep without having to worry about muscle cramps. TheraWorks Relief only takes minutes to apply, absorbs quickly, and it works. TheraWorks Relief is a life-changing product, and you don't even need a prescription. Get TheraWorks Relief today in the pain relief aisle at Walmart, CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens pharmacies or TheraWorksRelief.com.
His way to Florida earlier today, the president had a meeting on Air Force One with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who's been under pressure recently because of a published report.
The New York Times said that Rosenstein last year was trying to garner support for using the 25th Amendment to take out President Trump, even suggesting to one colleague that maybe he wear a wire to get some incriminating evidence on the president. It looked in the beginning like Rosenstein was done. He came to the White House the Monday after that article came out, expecting to be fired. Rosenstein strongly denied the allegations on at least 2 occasions, said he did no such thing, and the president does seem inclined to believe him.
Fox's John Roberts at the White House. Meantime, the president's message to law enforcement is that his administration has their back, also pledging today to address the persistent deadly violence in Chicago. A South Carolina officer killed in the line of duty during a standoff with a gunman last week is laid to rest.
Tributes came from those Sergeant Terrence Caraway knew.
Let me live for others so that I might live like thee.
And those he mentored into law enforcement.
I stand before you, not a product of my environment,
but a product of his vision.
Sergeant Caraway was killed last week protecting other wounded officers from a gunman in Florence, South Carolina. Darlington County Sheriff Tony Chavis was among the officers who saluted Caraway for his sacrifice.
We're bridge builders for our community. We need to be here to serve our citizens, and that's what Terrence did.
Caraway was a 30-year police veteran who leaves behind a wife and son. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Late reports that one of the two men Britain says poisoned an ex-Russian spy with a nerve agent is a doctor who works for Russian military intelligence. Russia still denies any involvement in the poisoning. Mixed start to the week on Wall Street, the Dow up 39 points. I'm Lisa Brady, and this is Fox News.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. One person was killed, several hurt in a house fire Sunday in the central Iowa town of Huxley. Radio Iowa's Matt Kelly reports.
3 residents of the house suffered from smoke inhalation and 1 died from it. That was 47-year-old Brett Van Ersvelde. He and 44-year-old Julie McLean were trying to get their 17-year-old son from his bedroom when the first responders arrived. McLean is hospitalized, as is the teen. 2 girls managed to escape with no injuries, though a Huxley police officer and a Story County Sheriff's deputy were hurt. It's believed the fire started in the kitchen. The state fire marshal is investigating. Radio Iowa, I'm Matt Kelly.
A new facility called an intermodal hub has been proposed for downtown Fort Dodge that would link the Warden Plaza and Cultural Recreation Center that has also been proposed for the city. The intermodal hub would offer parking and a connection between various forms of transportation. The estimated cost of the project is $11.5 million, and city government is asking for a $7.63 million grant to help pay for it. December 18th is the date that the city will find out if they've received the grant. If awarded, construction could begin in 2020 and be finished in the spring of 2021. The facility would be at First Avenue South in Fort Dodge. The continued wet weather may prove to be problematic for farmers wanting to harvest their crop. Iowa State University Extension grain quality specialist Charlie Herberg believes the wet conditions add a new issue to the harvest.
It's just been a difficult fall, and now we're going to have mold problems in the field for sure. And farmers need to scout their fields, look to see which hybrids or which fields seem to be more and less affected by mold problems and harvest them first.
Herberg says the condition of this year's grain is slightly below last year's harvest. He says for long-term storage of grain, corn moisture needs to be around 15% moisture, and for soybeans, the moisture content should be around 10 to 12%. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker urged fellow Democrats in Iowa this weekend to stay faithful despite hurt and angry feelings in the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court fight.
It is not a time to give up. It's a time to get up, to rise up, to speak up. It's time for you not to wait for hope, but to be the hope.
Booker was the keynote speaker at the Iowa Democratic Party's Fall Gala fundraiser Saturday night. He flew to Des Moines immediately after casting his no vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Booker is scheduled to campaign with Iowa Democrats in Adel, Boone, North Liberty, and Davenport. A registered sex offender in Iowa faces new charges after investigators say he molested several young boys on camping trips to a Story County park. KCCI reports that 30-year-old Michael Ferguson took several boys between ages of 9 and 4 camping at Hickory Grove Park in Colo. Court documents say Ferguson forced at least 4 children to perform sexual acts. Ferguson was recently arrested in Stark County, Ohio, and extradited to Story County. He's charged with 2 counts of second-degree sexual abuse, assault with intent to commit sexual abuse, and indecent exposure. He's being held in lieu of $500,000 bail. Ferguson was convicted of assault with the intent to commit sexual abuse of a teenage boy in 2008. This has been Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. Have a great day.
Here's the AM 1400 KVFD weatherology forecast. Scattered thunderstorms likely this afternoon, otherwise overcast. High temperatures reach up to 68, south winds 5 to 10 miles per hour. Scattered thunderstorms likely tonight, lows level off around 58, cloudy skies. Scattered thunderstorms again tomorrow, high temperatures reach up to 66. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. Currently, it's 62.
The opinions and remarks expressed on this radio program by the host, guests, and call-in listeners are the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not reflect the views of management or ownership of KVFD AM 1400.
Have the talk of the lifetime with the ones you love and make the difference of a lifetime.
Grandma, this card asks, what's your favorite family tradition?
Christmas would be my favorite. You know how we use the special tablecloth and all the fancy dishes?
And those cookies you always make.
Should we whip up a batch and bake some together now?
Sharing stories and memories with those who matter most isn't just important today. It will be especially significant when it's time to honor a life lived. Contact Gunderson Funeral Home to learn more about having the talk of a lifetime.
Thinking about life insurance? What if you could make one free phone call and learn your best price from nearly a dozen highly rated, price competitive companies? Well, that's exactly what happens when you call SelectQuote Life. For example, George is 40. He was getting sky-high quotes from other companies because he takes meds to control his blood pressure. But when I shopped around, I found him a 10-year, $500,000 policy for under $25 a month. I'm SelectQuote agent Dan Savino. And believe me, if SelectQuote isn't shopping for your life insurance, you're probably paying too much.
For your free quote, call 800-573-9552. That's 800-573-9552. 800-573-9552. Or go to SelectQuote.com. Since 1985, we shop, you save.
Get full details on the example policy at SelectQuote.com/commercials. Or price could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states.
We live in a prescription world. Seems like everywhere you turn, someone you know and love is using prescription pain medication on a regular basis. Sure, it helps with pain, but it could lead to damaging effects like headaches, digestive problems, addiction, and many other problems. So what do? Give us a try at Active Health Chiropractic and see how chiropractic care can be a better option for dealing with pain. Give us a call at Active Health Chiropractic, 227-7491.
Trust in Active Health Chiropractic and feel better today.
Doing some deep cleaning in your home or business? Don't throw your gently used stuff out. Take it to the general store, where every donation is tax deductible. When it's time to clean out your dressers, closets, attics, basements, and storerooms, just load it up and come to the general store. Their friendly staff will help unload everything with you. Remember, when you donate your gently used furniture, clothing, small appliances, and more to the general store, you're helping people with special needs in our community. The General Store, 12 North 25th, Fort Dodge.
Michael Devine, when you want compelling talk.
Well, all right, here we go. AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. We're going to tell the truth, make it matter. We're never going to be boring. We're doing that with, once again, Jerry Schnurr this afternoon. How are you, Jerry?
Great. Excuse me. I have to compliment you. Excuse me, on the introductory music.
Oh, yeah, Trucking by the Grateful Dead. Yeah, I always get into for some reason, I always get into the Dead around the fall of the year. You know, when I have a skeleton here in the studio, for example. I don't know.
Brought him out of the closet.
Brought him out of the closet. I always get out the Day of the Dead stuff. So there we go. Jerry Schnurr is a local attorney, and Jerry and I talk about the legal system, the justice system, the courts particularly, and how these courts affect our lives. I don't know if there's ever been a better time to talk about the courts or a worse time. What I've seen has been tremendously depressing as far as how the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh has been handled. I saw some of the craziest people ever, seemingly unhinged at times, and some of the most bitter partisanship I think I've seen since the Watergate times. And there is concern by some that the court has been irreparably damaged. Not in my eyes. I was never a big fan of the court in the first place. As you know, Jerry Schnurr and I have talked all of this time, almost 10 years now. And my contention has always been that we simply cannot, in a democracy, give this much authority to 9 people at the federal level or 7 at the state level. But I don't know if that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about or where I want to go with this afternoon. I'm talking about respect for the court in general. I think every time there's a ruling now with the Supreme Court, it will be seen as political. I think every single time, especially where Judge Kavanaugh is involved, it'll be seen as political. And of course, Kavanaugh supporters will pick up the chant from the other side. Well, there's Justice Sotomayor, and she was appointed by Obama, and she's a liberal, and she's this and that. And there's Justice Ginsburg, and she was an abortion lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union. By the way, who was passed through the Senate by a vote of 96-0 back during Bill Clinton's time in the White House. And of course, abortion then was very controversial. And Justice Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, made no bones about the fact that she saw a need and a right for abortion in the law. So times have changed with Mr. Kavanaugh, or Justice Kavanaugh now, because there is a concern about Roe versus Wade and abortion in general. Jerry, what was your takeaway from all of this?
Well, there was a lot to it. And there was, I think, there's a concern from the hearing. There was a concern about bias that came out during his testimony that was really I think unprecedented. I could be wrong, but when he lashed out at the Democrats and the left and some left or liberal type conspiracy and retaliation or revenge for his involvement with Ken Starr and the Clintons, and then his level of anger and the reaction he had. Many people were concerned about his bias and judicial temperament and his temperament, and that was a big concern that I saw people have with this. And when you're talking about, I guess, the politicalization of the court, I think we have seen that. I think it has been politicized. I think the Senate has politicized the court, and I think the president has politicized the court. I think it was politicized in the election when in the last presidential election. I think they were holding open the seat after Scalia's death rather than having a hearing or meeting with Merrick Garland, and they were holding that open as an attempt to politicize it and politicize the court and use that for elections. And politically, it was successful.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think it was right. And I think it undermines the court. It undermines the legitimacy of the court, because rightly or wrongly, what the court has is its reputation for its legitimacy. And the court has to have a reputation for impartiality, for being a place where people were treated fairly, regardless of their outcome, or regardless of their background, or even regardless of their political leanings. If they come to the court, you're to be treated fairly under the law, just as and have your case heard and decided based on the law, and not based on whether you're associated with a particular party or ideology or not. So that's a real concern I think people have that has been accelerated, I'm afraid, according to what a lot of people think. So I think it's a real concern, and I think we have to really guard against that. I think we have to do what we can to protect our institutions, our democracy, and our republic based upon the Constitution.
Well, there's talk of court packing now on the left. There's all kinds of things that are being brought up, all kinds of wild accusations. By the way, the Lord of Liberalism himself, the great godfather of the liberal order, Franklin Roosevelt, who I personally admire greatly, he had a lot of his New Deal plans scuttled by a very conservative Supreme Court in the 1930s. So he just decided we're going to increase the number of Supreme Court justices by 4. And there was a plan in place to do exactly that. The Supreme Court backed off some of their conservative rulings and mentioned it. Individual justices mentioned it in their memoirs that they changed their attitude towards some of President Roosevelt's proposals, so we could save 9. There was going to be a stitch in time to save 9, as one of them said. I don't quite get the reference. It must be too old for me. But the courts have been, in my mind, and to my way of thinking, as you well know, Jerry, have been politicized for a long, long time. I just do not believe you can take a bunch of essentially political appointees, and I do not recall, Jerry, and help me remember if you do. I do not remember when the best person objectively was appointed to the Supreme Court. Every single Supreme Court justice there now was put there because of their particular thinking and ideology. And I think it's expecting too much of any group, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, to be perfect, to be objective when we're talking about this sort of power in the third branch of government. It's just not going to happen, to my mind.
Well, I don't think that we. Here's how I think about it. And we've talked about this. I think the Constitution gives the president the authority to appoint members to the federal court, including the Supreme Court, subject to the advice and consent of the Senate. That has changed recently, in recent years, and I'm talking about the arc of history. In recent years, that has become more contentious. And I don't necessarily think I would blame one party or the other. I think they're both. They both have a role to play in the politicalization of the court. The right has, and the conservative side of politics has had Roe versus Wade as a primary thorn in their side, and they've made no bones about it that they want to appoint justices to the Supreme Court that will overturn Roe versus Wade, and likewise. Liberals on the other side feel the same. Now, I'm not sure that presidents feel that way all the time. I think, though, given a president is more likely than not to nominate or appoint somebody who's more ideologically and or looks at the Constitution more in line with the way they look at it than the way somebody on the other side of the aisle might look at it. And that's to be expected. And so they will probably nominate people that are more in line with their thoughts and views than not. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will stay that way. We've recently had Justice John Paul Stevens, who was appointed by, was that Eisenhower that appointed him? Or
No. John Paul Stevens was appointed by Ford.
Ford. Okay, so he didn't go back that far.
No.
But appointed by a Republican and viewed by most, and was probably a centrist and was conservative at the time, but by the time of his retirement a few years ago, most people viewed him as more liberal on the court, which is an indication to me that in general the court had as a whole drifted more to the right. And this appointment of Kavanaugh is going to take it further to the right, probably ideologically. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they will stay and make decisions that the person that appointed them wants, because they're not beholden to them to keep their job. I've been in seminars where judges have talked and they've been asked what if the governor or the president were to call you and say, hey, I'd really like you to make your decision on this case go this way. And the judge quite clearly said, well, thanks for your call, but I'll do what I darn well please, according to what the law says. And I have the absolute right to hang up on them then, and probably would. So judges, once they're appointed, and the nice thing about being subject to life appointment is they're not beholden to the person that nominated them. And they can make the decision based on the law, even if the person that nominated them or the party that backed the person that nominated him doesn't like it.
Well, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey is on full crazy, and he was here in Iowa overnight, or last night, I should say, at a gathering of Democrats in Des Moines, and he, of course, was there to whip up the enthusiasm of the Democratic Party heading into the elections, which are about, a month away? Not even that, I guess. Matter of fact, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you can vote today.
Yeah.
You can go over to the courthouse and vote today. I forgot, or I'd have gone to vote this morning, but I'll be over there tomorrow to vote. I just like to do it and get it out of the way, and so I'll head to the courthouse tomorrow and cast my ballot. And I encourage everyone to vote. I mean, it's always amazed me, and it's been amazing to many people that we have such low voter turnout.
Yeah.
These elections decide our lives, and nobody cares. The majority don't seem to care.
Yeah.
But anyway, Senator Booker's on full crazy, and he's talking about, well, we should investigate Justice Kavanaugh if we take control of the House. By we, he means the Democratic Party. We should investigate Justice Kavanaugh and President Trump, and we should impeach them both.
I've received similar emails from conservative groups today about investigating Dr. Ford's lawyers and whether they could be in trouble and so on.
Oh God, let it go. See, that's
Yeah.
what I mean. There's nothing final. It's just that we're going to fight and fight and fight
Yeah.
forever, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
George.
Both sides are using this appointment to try and drum up support and enthusiasm for the elections coming up.
They're getting it done too. I mean, Mitch McConnell thanked the Democratic Party yesterday on Fox News.
Yeah.
Said thanks a lot. Our side wasn't as enthused as your side wasn't excited as your side was, but they are now, and that's probably true.
Yeah.
That's probably true. I'm a little bit more politically aware to get too excited and rush to the courthouse and vote for somebody because I got mad in the last 24 hours.
Right.
I may be patting myself on the back, but I've done that before, so it's okay.
Yeah. That's okay.
That's okay. Anyway, I don't know what to think now. I have again been talking with you all these years and with others about court reform or making the court more answerable to the wishes of the people, or making sure that the court gets away from this ludicrous idea of a living, breathing constitution. But I don't think it's the court's role to make new laws or any of those things. I'm firmly in the Judge Scalia camp on this one.
Yeah.
But anyway, now it's like now just in the last few days or a few weeks, it seems like the whole country hates the court.
Well, and we don't know for sure how this appointment is going to affect the court, although based upon Kavanaugh's writings and proclamations and rulings in the past that we had access to, it'll push it more to the right. So that means that you can predict the kinds of cases, search and seizure, the government cases. The government will have some more authority. Corporations will win more over individuals. Those are the kinds of things you'll hear. And whether that, he apparently made a statement to Senator Collins that he thinks Roe versus Wade is good law. What's that mean? What kind of limits will there be that may come up in connection with abortions and birth control and women's health that has drawn concern? We don't know. And Roberts has a role in this too, and there are other, there's 8 other justices on the court, and Roberts has to be concerned about the image of the court, as they all do, because that's where the court draws its power and legitimacy from, is from its image and from its reputation as being impartial and making decisions based on law and not politics.
Well, Kavanaugh's a Republican, and he will see things through Republican eyes, as will the Democratic members of the court. I don't know how we're ever going to get away from it. But since people are human, of course, I don't really need to say that, but since personal decisions and hurts and beliefs are going to come into people's decisions, I know Brett Kavanaugh repeatedly said that he had the discipline to uphold the Constitution, no matter what he thought. And I'm sure that he's a very disciplined person. I'm sure all the justices are very disciplined people. But we know they're going to rule in a certain way. We just do. So I would change the court, but I wouldn't destroy it, as some are calling for now.
Right.
Jerry, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Have a great day.
You too. This is AM 1400 KVFT, the voice of Fort Dodge.
Divine Intervention at AM 1400 KVFT, where Fort Dodge talk.
All right, 429, ladies and gentlemen. Yes! The news and weather is next.
Trucking, got my chips cashed in, keep trucking, like the Dog Man together, more or less in line, just keep trucking,
Elvis is back. And this time he's bringing his friend Johnny Cash with him.
I hear the train coming.
Alpha Media presents the Elvis and Johnny Tribute with Joseph Hall and Paul Eve, Friday night, November 2nd in the Cardiff Center at Fort Frenzy.
Every time I hear new boy, baby cry.
Because you're mine, I'll walk the line.
Doors open at 5:30 and the Elvis and Johnny Tribute starts at 7. Tickets are $25 in advance or $30 at the door. Get them now at Hy-Vee Fort Dodge, the Iowa Outdoor Store, or Fort Frenzy. Bring the whole family to see this tribute to the king of rock and roll and the man in black as Joseph Hall and Paul Eve present the Elvis and Johnny Tribute. Friday night, November 2nd at Fort Frenzy. Brought to you in part by Riley Armstrong Plumbing and Heating, J&M Construction in Bode, Cactus Family Farms, the Iowa Outdoor Store, and United Bank of Iowa in Fort Dodge, Rockwell City, and Pocahontas. The Elvis and Johnny Tribute is an Alpha Media event.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Benzgal with the KVFD Afternoon News. One person was killed, several hurt in a house fire Sunday in the central Iowa town of Huxley. Radio Iowa's Matt Kelly reports.
3 residents of the house suffered from smoke inhalation and 1 died from it. That was 47-year-old Brett Van Ursvelde. He and 44-year-old Julie McLean were trying to get their 17-year-old son from his bedroom when the first responders arrived. McLean is hospitalized, as is the teen. 2 girls managed to escape with no injuries, though a Huxley police officer and a Story County Sheriff's deputy were hurt. It's believed the fire started in the kitchen. The state fire marshal is investigating. Radio Iowa, I'm Matt Kelly.
A new facility called an intermodal hub has been proposed for downtown Fort Dodge that would link the Warden Plaza and Cultural Recreation Center that has also been proposed for the city. The intermodal hub would offer parking and a connection between various forms of transportation. The estimated cost of the project is $11.5 million, and city government is asking for a $7.63 million grant to help pay for it. December 18th is the date that the city will find out if they've received the grant. If awarded, construction could begin in 2020 and be finished in the spring of 2021. The facility would be at First Avenue South in Fort Dodge. The continued wet weather may prove to be problematic for farmers wanting to harvest their crop. Iowa State University Extension Grain Quality Specialist Charlie Herberg believes the wet conditions add a new issue to the harvest.
It's just been a difficult fall, and now we're going to have mold problems in the field for sure. And farmers need to scout their fields, look to see which hybrids or which fields seem to be more and less affected by mold problems and harvest them first.
Herberg says the condition of this year's grain is slightly below last year's harvest. He says for long-term storage of grain, corn moisture needs to be around 15% moisture, and for soybeans, the moisture content should be around 10 to 12%. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker urged fellow Democrats in Iowa this weekend to stay faithful despite hurt and angry feelings in the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court fight.
It is not a time to give up. It's a time to get up, to rise up, to speak up. It's time for you not to wait for hope, but to be the hope.
Booker was the keynote speaker at the Iowa Democratic Party's Fall Gala fundraiser Saturday night. He flew to Des Moines immediately after casting his no vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Booker is scheduled to campaign with Iowa Democrats in Adel, Boone, North Liberty, and Davenport. A registered sex offender in Iowa faces new charges after investigators say he molested several young boys on camping trips to a Story County park. KCCI reports that 30-year-old Michael Ferguson took several boys between the ages of 9 and 4 camping at Hickory Grove Park in Colo. Court documents say Ferguson forced at least 4 children to perform sexual acts. Ferguson was recently arrested in Stark County, Ohio, and extradited to Story County. He's charged with 2 counts of second-degree sexual abuse, assault with intent to commit sexual abuse, and indecent exposure. Twitter. He's being held in lieu of $500,000 bail. Ferguson was convicted of assault with the intent to commit sexual abuse of a teenage boy in 2008. This has been Alex Benzagal with the KVFD Afternoon News. Have a great day.
From the Fox Business Network on Wall Street, the major averages closing mixed with the Dow reversing course and closing in the green. Among the gainers today, consumer staples companies and financials, while tech companies fell for the third session in a row. The bond market was closed in observance of Columbus Day. The Dow snapping a two-day losing streak, closing up 40 points. The Nasdaq down 53, S&P 500 down 1. And Netflix selecting Albuquerque, New Mexico as the site of a new U.S. production hub. The streaming service giant is in final negotiations to purchase Albuquerque studios and plans to bring $1 billion in production to New Mexico over the next 10 years. They also hope to create 1,000 production jobs a year. This will be Netflix's first purchase of a production studio complex. Both the state's governor and Albuquerque's mayor touting the investment and said years of work to put New Mexico on the movie-making map are paying off. With the Fox Business Report, I'm Hillary Barsky.
And now, the worst commercial ever.
I'm just your average, everyday, hardworking plumber. But when it comes to my business, only the best. Like commercial auto and business insurance through Progressive. They help design a customized insurance solution that gets the job done right, just like me.
An actor trying to sound like a plumber. Excruciating. Whereas commercial auto and business insurance through Progressive is anything but. Visit progressivecommercial.com to quote today. Insurance provided and serviced by Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. It's affiliated and third-party insurers.
Pure brute strength. That's what you get with Midland hydraulic doors from P&R Entry Door. Midland doors are perfect for commercial and agricultural applications. When you choose a Midland garage door from P&R Entry Door, you can be confident you've chosen the toughest commercial door on the market. Whether you want a shop door for agriculture, an aviation hangar, or a commercial building, P&R Entry Door has what you need. For a free estimate, call 573-8883. P&R Entry Door online at pnrentrydoors.com.
Take the worry out of winter with a winter weather advisor on KVFD, brought to you by Community Health Center Fort Dodge, offering dental, behavioral health, and general medical assistance for men, women, and children. They're committed to your well-being. Community Health Center. Get to know them. And Creative Cakes, making life sweet with espresso, lunch, gourmet cupcakes, and other sweet treats. Creative Cakes in the Crossroads Mall, Fort Dodge. They make life sweet. Listen for the winter weather advisor on the Voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400 KVFD.
What makes SO4 the smart sulfur source? Superior solubility for delivering sulfur and calcium when the plant needs it throughout the entire growing season. Other sulfur sources release too quickly or too slowly, failing to meet the crop's full needs. SO4 is also pH neutral, so it won't acidify the soil like those other sulfur sources. As you can see, SO4 is the smart sulfur source. Talk to your agronomist or learn more at calciumproducts.com.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
This is AM 1400, KVFT, the voice of Fort Dodge. I'm Michael Devine, and we are going to tell the truth, make it matter, and we're never going to be boring. Our guest, once again today, is Dr. Dean Stanzel, an economist with Southern Methodist University and a longtime contributor to the program. Hi, Dean.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Dr. Stanzel's with the O'Neill Center at SMU. Please explain the O'Neill Center.
Sure thing. The O'Neill Center for Global Markets and Freedom is in the Cox Business School at SMU in Dallas, and it was established by one of our alums, William O'Neill, who is also the founder of Investors Business Daily newspaper, and we focus on studying the impact of competitive market forces on freedom and prosperity in the global economy. We are at o'neillcenter.org, O-N-E-I-L.
Right. And Dr. Stanzel and I have been talking for quite some time about globalization, markets, those sort of things. Dr. Stanzel definitely believes that we benefit from open and free trade globally. And my running commentary and question with Dr. Stanzel is how can we appreciate low prices here in the United States if we have no jobs, if all the manufacturing jobs are in Malaysia or God knows where. But let's start off, first of all, with the USMCA agreement, which has taken the place of NAFTA. Now, NAFTA, however you want to slice it from my point of view, was grossly oversold. It was way oversold. Bill Clinton definitely wanted to take care of the investor class, and he did. It moved the Democratic Party to the right as far as the economy was concerned. But as has been noted, it was unfair to the United States in a number of ways. The agreement with Mexico, the change in the NAFTA agreement to make it now the USMCA agreement, the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, the change with Mexico was worked out in about 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, it needed updating. It was 25 years old. And we have a new president who is tough on trade issues. So this was going to happen. Mexico understood it. And we worked it out with Mexico efficiently. Canada was another story. The Canadians, we always have to remember, we bump into Canadians all the time around here. And they look like us and they speak like us, but they're actually from another country with different attitudes and a different culture. Canada is much more socialist than we are. And that's where it kind of, I mean, our Wisconsin dairy farmers and dairy farmers here in Iowa have long been shut out of the Canadian dairy market. It's now open. And the reason, I saw Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada on television the other night, and he said, well, one of the reasons we had to get on board is we couldn't afford to be frozen out of this agreement. And besides, the United States is 10 times bigger than we are. Well, there are some reasons, Doctor. But what is your take on the USMCA agreement, the updating?
Well, it's better than not getting an agreement. So that's kind of a low bar. But
I was going to say that's very lukewarm.
Well, listen, the TPP, which we pulled out of, would have been substantially better than this agreement. But like I said, it's better to have an agreement in place than not. But look, this thing is like almost 2,000 pages long, and any document created by politicians or bureaucrats that's that long can't possibly be good for freedom. Look, it wouldn't take more than a page to really have a true free trade agreement, and this isn't that. As you noted, there's some important improvements here in terms of the dairy market. A little bit more access. It's not a huge change, but there's some there. There are some other issues with the auto manufacturing provisions that are going to make it harder for U.S. or actually for any of the three countries for auto manufacturers to basically to do business. One of the rules that I read about just a minute ago was that cars will have to have 75% of their value created within North America in order to cross its borders duty-free.
Oh, my God, not that.
Well, look here, I understand your point, I think, but part of the problem is in a global economy, there are supply chain networks in effect that go across borders, and that makes us able as consumers, me and you, to buy things like automobiles cheaper than we would otherwise be able to. This is going to make that part harder, and so we'll have to pay more for cars because of that. And so for consumers, that's higher prices are not a good thing. The steel and aluminum tariffs are still in there. They didn't really do anything about those that we put on Canadian and Mexican steel and aluminum exports. And those will continue to have cost to the economy in terms of producers having to pay more for their raw materials.
Dr. Dean Stanzo is our guest at AM 1400, KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. I know you're not a pro-labor guy. You're more of a big picture global economy guy. And, of course, Milton Friedman is God in the global economy.
Oh, how is that not pro-labor, though?
Well,
what do you mean by laboring?
It's
the labor union movement.
Yeah. You have seen what happened to labor unions, private sector labor unions in the United States since NAFTA.
Well, even before that, though, they were trending downwards in terms of their membership percentages. But yeah, sure, NAFTA did some great things to open up markets, and in part contributed to the boom that occurred in the Clinton years. NAFTA was a big part of that.
Well, if I'm a Mexican politician, I'm all for NAFTA. I mean, a lot of American manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, moved to Mexico. And any Mexican politician can cruise around the country and say, look what I brought you. Look what I brought you.
Yeah, well, fair enough. One of the things related to the auto manufacturing that I didn't mention previously is that one of the provisions here is kind of harmful to Mexico in the sense that it says up to 40% of the value created in terms of car production will have to come from workers earning at least $16 an hour on average, which will mainly affect, of course, low-wage Mexico. So there's that cuts both ways, of course. But it's not only good for any one particular country. I think the fact that the North American partnerships and global supply networks can move forward with some certainty, at least, right? There's some certainty now. Not people won't have to be wondering what's going to be. It's not a great agreement, but it's better than not having one.
Why was it inferior? Why is the agreement now inferior to the previous agreement, now known as NAFTA?
The agreement now known as, it's definitely inferior to TPP. When it comes to NAFTA, I mean, there's some things better, some things worse, but mainly that the TPP was substantially superior to what we have now, in part because of it doesn't end these tariffs. It doesn't. It creates problems for free trade deals. In other words, if the U.S. wants to make a deal with China or Canada wants to make a deal with China, if any of those sorts of things happen independently, bilaterally, then any of the three parties can pull out essentially, and so that means it discourages the reduction of tariffs with other countries, with what are called non-market economies.
Well, I actually asked that question awkwardly. I'm asking why the NAFTA agreement was better than the USMCA agreement.
Yeah, I mean, it was better. As I said, it was better in some ways and not so good in other ways. And part of the issue, and as you stated, NAFTA was put in place a very long time ago. Perhaps it bared some updating, but the fact of kind of walking away from it would have done great harm. And the fact that we got something in place is an improvement. We've got with relative to NAFTA, there's a greater liberalization in terms of the trade of goods between the three countries, but not hugely different. And there's other provisions in there that, like I said, it's a 2,000-page document. I promise you I haven't read it, but there are things on pros and cons to this, as there would be with any sort of thing that's negotiated amongst folks from three different countries.
Well, we're going to talk about, and we're talking with Dr. Dean Stanzel, our friend and longtime contributor to this program. He's an economist of Southern Methodist University. We're going to go into economic happy talk now because the unemployment rate has dropped to are we ready for this? 49-year low. 49-year low. And there's always a discussion out there. Should Trump get off Twitter and let his economic record speak for itself? That's a compelling argument. It's not going to happen. But
be less entertaining, but
yeah, it would be less entertaining. It would be better in some ways. Well, I mean, the economy. I mean, here in Iowa, this is the lowest unemployment rate we have seen since the '60s. In the '60s, let me tell you, we're a long time ago. When were you born, Dr. Stanzel? I mean, were you even around in the '60s? Because
I was around for that last year.
That last year, I was going to say most.
But
yeah, most of the population. I know this is painful for my fellow baby boomers, but most of the population wasn't even born in the 1960s.
That's right. Yeah, it's a huge change in terms of it being that long since the rate was this low, and that is an important element of this latest jobs report. To try to nitpick and pull out some negative stuff, here's a couple things. The number for new jobs was about 50,000 less than they were expecting. So there's one evidence of some underperforming in terms of job creation, and also on wages. Wage growth fell slightly to about 2.8%, whereas inflation was 2.7%. So wages, at least, are barely keeping up with inflation. So those are the two things from the Bureau of Labor Statistics job report that came out Friday that are bear some warning. But overall, if you look at this in combination with the latest GDP report that came out a while back, it's things are trending in the right direction. And so if they can just kind of not screw it up with the trade war, we could see this. Look, we're currently in I believe it's the second longest expansion and coming up close to being the longest, and so we're due for a recession on average, at least statistically speaking. But we'll see. So far, so good.
Now there's and I'm going to post this on my Facebook page. There's an article from The Economist that Dr. Stanzel sent me, and of course Dr. Stanzel sends these articles or some research or information before we speak every single week. But one of the reasons that that wages were stagnant was energy prices. They had been continually rising, but energy prices this time around, according to The Economist, energy prices, which previously had been a substantial driving factor of inflation, especially as the economy grew and demand for energy rose, are more subdued since fracking technology, yes, fracking technology, vastly increased access to known oil and gas resources in the early 2010s. And by the way, we produce plenty of ethanol and biodiesel right here in Iowa. So the reason I'm bringing this up and highlighting this is because my environmentalist friends hate fracking. They just lose their minds over fracking. But, they're liberals and, I love them, but they lose their minds over practically everything. I think they're under sedation today after the Kavanaugh hearings. But
yeah, you're right about the energy price thing. And that's from the Mercatus article, actually, not the Economist one.
Oh, the Mercatus. Okay.
But another point that they make, and that's important, is that just looking at wages doesn't really give the full picture, especially if you're looking over long stretches of time back into the past, because one of the things that's happened over the past decades is that the percentage of compensation that comes from wages and salaries has gone down and down as there are more and more mandated benefits that employers have to require for their workers. And so we're getting more and more fringe benefits, if you want to call them that, not non-wage, non-salary compensation that aren't really reflected here, because sometimes it's things that you can't really quantify, even things like a more being able to telecommute, to work from home, things that more flexible work schedule in general that benefit us, but you can't really put a dollar value on it, at least not easily.
I've heard that recently more and more professional people and others, not all professional people, but they're working from home. They can do that
right now.
Yeah. Well, you're just talking to me on the air, though.
True.
Part
of my job.
It is part of your job, and and it's been great to have you all these years, and hopefully you'll stay with us in the future for even more. But I'm talking about moving goods and services around the country, even the world, from somebody's kitchen.
Right.
That's remarkable.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's more and more of that going on, and the economy's changing, and just like with, I think we talked about maybe last week we talked about it. Just like when Sears Roebuck came along and blew up all the mom and pops, now Amazon and Walmart come along and kind of do the same thing. This ability of people to trade across the internet or using smartphone apps has really opened up new opportunities. And ultimately, in the way the economy works with creative destruction, it's going to destroy some others, right? And there's going to be this churn that constantly goes on in the marketplace. But it's creating value for people. And also, Michael, one of the things that's important about this is that it's creating value that sometimes is really hard to measure. Like when we look at things like the CPI, the CPI is the Consumer Price Index that measures the rate of inflation, or even when you look at GDP, in both cases where they're trying to measure the total value of production, which is what sheet gross domestic product does. How do you measure the value of, for example, the internet? I mean, we don't pay anything for it usually. I mean, you pay, I guess, your internet service provider.
Yeah, sure.
Your frequent access to the internet creates great value for us, but it's really not showing up in GDP in any way that comes close to reflecting its value to individuals. There's this story of people asking, say, their college students, what would you, how much money would it take for you to give up the internet for the rest of your life?
It would take some.
It would take, more than anyone's got to give them, right? People were like, no, I wouldn't even do it for $1 million, right? So there's great value created if you multiply that across all the people. That's a whole lot of stuff that's not really being reflected. And the other thing with that is think about the quality of the TV in your home and how much it costs relative to what the old ones used to cost. So the total value of production in terms of going into the GDP, since the cost is lower, is actually going down. But for us, it's a much higher quality product, and that's not really picked up well with GDP or the CPI for that matter.
This is AM 1400 KVFT, the voice of Fort Dodge. Our guest, Dr. Dean Stansel, an economist with Southern Methodist University. So are you going to let the United States and Mexico and Canada slide on this free trade deal, the USMCA deal, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, or are you going to be permanently in a funk over the whole thing?
Oh, I'm not going to be in a funk about it. I try to, have reasonable expectations about what's going to come out of public policy, which is it's usually bad. So I'm not going to get too down about it. But yeah, I think that they could have done better, frankly. And it's one more area where folks like me and other public policy activists and academics and scholars can have some room to get some work done to try to convince people that the open borders, that'd be great too. But open borders to goods, at least, if not people, is a good thing, and it creates value for all of us.
As long as countries are populated by people, you will have people arguing for their own self-preservation and prosperity. And there are different ways of looking at that. Some will believe that open and free trade is the answer to greater prosperity for everyone. There are those who will argue protectionism or the greatest social evil of all time, communism. Communism was... Does anybody still believe in that? I hope not. I hope not. I don't think the Chinese do, and I'm not sure the Russians do.
No, North Korea, I suppose.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I'm not sure people within North Korea other than handful.
Who knows what they believe there? But as far as the low unemployment rate, what was driving? Were Trump's tax cuts driving a contributory factor to low unemployment, or what do you see as the chief reason for low unemployment?
So there's been a downward trend for some time now, probably the last year and a half or so. And I do think that the tax changes, well, those didn't go in effect until January. So those can't be the whole story. One of the things in the first year of in 2017 of his presidency that they did do fairly successfully was to roll back some existing government regulations and slow the growth of regulations. And that was something they were able to do kind of unilaterally without congressional approval. And those sorts of things affect the ability of employers to make new hires, right? A lot of those regulations make it more costly to expand your business and hire new workers. And so part of it has been that, right? And another part of it, I think, has been the fact that going into the 2016 election, there was a lot of uncertainty amongst entrepreneurs about what was going to be the policy environment. And so there was a lot of pent-up kind of resources out there ready to expand, but waiting to see what was going to happen with the election and where the rules were going to be going. And once that certainty came about, I think it freed up a lot of that pent-up resources that were waiting to be used, but we're just a little uncertain about what the environment was going to be.
All right. Our guest has been Dr. Dean Stansel from Southern Methodist University and the O'Neill Center. Dean, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Michael.
This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge.
I remember a teacher that I had. Now, I went through the 7th grade. I went to the 7th grade. I left home when I was 10 years old because I was hungry. I used to, this is true. I work in the summer, I go to school in the winter. But I had this one teacher. He was the principal of the Harrison School in Vincennes, Indiana. To me, this was the greatest teacher, a real sage of my time, anyhow. He had such wisdom. And we were all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance one day. And he walked over, this little old teacher, Mr. Laswell was his name. Mr. Laswell. And he says, I've been listening to you boys and girls recite the Pledge of Allegiance all semester, and it seems as though it's becoming monotonous to you. If I may I recite it and try to explain to you the meaning of each word. I, me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge. Dedicate all of my worldly goods to give without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion. to the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there's respect, because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts, freedom is everybody's job. United. That means that we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose. All divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united to a common purpose. And that's love for country. And to the Republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people. And it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands. One nation, meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable
For
of being
exciting
divided.
Panther sports, keep it right here on your home for University of Northern Iowa sports in North Central Iowa. The voice of Fort Dodge, KVFD, Fort Dodge.
He calls it a monstrous storm. I'm Lisa Lacera, Fox News. Florida Governor Rick Scott as Hurricane Michael gains strength.
Hurricane Michael poses a deadly threat, and as it grows stronger, we can expect it to make landfall as a major Category 3 storm on Wednesday along the Gulf Coast.
A state of emergency has already been declared for 35 counties, and he has asked President Trump for assistance ahead of the storm.
As the storm approaches, there will also be a significant threat of tornadoes. Hurricane Michael is a massive storm that could bring total devastation to parts of our state, especially in the Panhandle.
He's urging people who live along the Gulf Coast to finish their storm preparations. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey has issued a statewide state of emergency in anticipation of damage from Michael. The investigation underway into what caused a horrific limo crash in upstate New York Saturday that killed 20 people. Fox's Gernal Scott has more live.
Elisa, the National Transportation Safety Board is looking into the crash. Chairman Robert Sumwalt says the condition and modification of the car will be a key focus, as well as the seatbelts within.
We're not sure if all seating positions were equipped with seatbelts, and we are not sure at this point whether or not the seatbelts were worn by anyone.
Sumwalt did say those in the rear of the limo, according to New York state law, were not required to wear seatbelts. Governor Andrew Cuomo says the limo failed a state inspection. Autopsies continue on the victims to determine any other crash factors, Lisa.
Gernal, a ceremonial swearing in next hour for Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. President Trump commenting on the ceremony a short time ago after arriving at the White House.
I've always been told it's the biggest thing a president can do, and I can understand that. So it'll be very special.
Kavanaugh officially sworn in over the weekend and is working with his clerks to prepare for his first day on the bench. This is Fox News.
When it's too cold for camping, we go camping. When it's too hot to work, we work. The John Deere Gator XUV 835 comes with game-changing heat and AC and 3 wide seating, so it's never too anything for anything. Nothing runs like the strong, and nothing runs like a Deere. Visit your John Deere dealer to test drive today. Get $400 off the Gator XUV 835M at participating John Deere dealers now through October 26, 2018. See your dealer for details.
To experience relief from muscle cramps in your legs and feet, use TheraWorks Relief. This non-greasy foam is proven to relieve muscle cramps fast and reduce muscle soreness. TheraWorks Relief can also prevent muscle cramps before they start, so you can get a full night's sleep without having to worry about muscle cramps. TheraWorks Relief only takes minutes to apply, absorbs quickly, and it works. TheraWorks Relief is a life-changing product, and you don't even need a prescription. Get TheraWorks Relief today in the pain relief aisle at Walmart, CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens pharmacies, or TheraWorksRelief.com.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Benzgal with the KVFD Afternoon News. One person was killed, several hurt in a house fire Sunday in the central Iowa town of Huxley. Radio Iowa's Matt Kelly reports.
3 residents of the house suffered from smoke inhalation and 1 died from it. That was 47-year-old Brett Van Ersvelde. He and 44-year-old Julie McLean were trying to get their 17-year-old son from his bedroom when the first responders arrived. McLean is hospitalized, as is the teen. 2 girls managed